Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. And I'm very happy to see you online. My name is Paula Castiati. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for CALP Market. And on behalf of CARE, the Swiss Development Agency for Cooperation, the Women Refugee Commission, and CALP, I'm very happy to welcome you all to this event today. While we are waiting for a few more people to join us online, you can set your preferred language channel. Please go and move to the next slide. At the bottom of your screen, you can see a small globe icon. If you click on there, you can select your preferred language. We have simultaneous translation in Arabic and Turkish. Now that you're set, I hope that the channel are all working and you can hear me loud and clear in your preferred language. So a few rules for today before we get going. Do please resist the temptation of checking your phone, your emails, or multitasking while you're attending this event, because your inputs and contribution are highly valued. The whole event will run up to 5 p.m. Eastern European Summer Time. If you need to interact with us, please use the chat box and maybe some of us monitoring it. You are muted by default. So if you wanna speak up and join our conversation, you need first to raise your hand and you will be unmuted and allowed to speak. The event is recording and the event is recorded and we will share it with you together with a set of resources right after the event itself. So the agenda for today, it's quite dense. We will have two different sessions. The first half of the event will have a moment of introduction, then we will see a snapshot of CVA integrated GBV program models and lesson learned from the MENA region. We'll have a conversation about achievements and priorities from the community of practice at the global and national level. We will also discuss key takeaway from previous two workshops that have been happening during the month of September. We will take a 30-minute break, and for the second bit of the event, we will have a panel conversation between local organization and donors to see what is working, not working, and way forward. So I really hope that you will enjoy this moment. I hope you can feel in a safe place right now, and I invite you to, of course, respect each other job and people roles, but also to take this moment as a peer-to-peer type of learning session, because this is what you ultimately would like to have. So without taking too much more time, next slide, please. Today's event is not an isolated initiative, it's part of a longer one, which runs over the last 2 years and aim at undertaking activities to strengthen capacity, improve practices, and build evidences, particularly in the MENA region. Capacity building and evidence generation approach are informing upcoming effort in the region and globally. And in order to share knowledge, best practice, there's a set of resources available, which is composed by podcasts, case studies, and we recently have a series of webinars which just ended yesterday. Moreover, we also have a training curriculum which has been created. Karen, you can move, thank you. And the training is 6 weeks online type of training facilitated course, which targets protection, gender, and GBV specialists who are planning to use CVA for GBV outcomes. The course is structured around GBV case management approach and includes 5 topics mirroring the project cycle. The course is built around the already existing face-to-face material, which are based on the Cushion GBV compendium itself. If you do want to join, by the end of it, you will be able to explain how CVA can contribute to GBV response objective and decide if and how CVA is appropriate modality to support the delivery of a comprehensive GBV response. The course is for approximately 6% self-direct learning, and 40% of it is facilitated. The materials are now available in 4 different languages, so for sure we have English and Arabic. And we started launching this course since last year. We started in November, and we had the chance to run in total 8 different cohorts. Can we move to the next slide? And since November last year, we ran 4 courses in English, 3 in Arabic, and we also had 1 TOT session. The course seemed to be it's definitely quite interesting. And as you can see from the quotes in the little box at the end, attendees who participated with it really enjoyed and appreciated the possibility to work together. Okay, so without wasting our other time, we can definitely go into the heart of the conversation. And at this point, I would like to engage with you and to hear from you. What are you using CVA for GBV outcome? And you can see there's a poll coming up. Please free to pick your country of operation. Apologies if your country is not there. We had a limited number of options in the Zoom setting, so you can add into the chat box if you like. A few more minutes for everyone to answer. See, some of you are still answering. All right, I guess that majority of you seems to have answered. If you cannot use the chat, you can use the Q&A option. We're also monitoring that. I guess we can close the poll from here so we see the results. Can we have the results of the poll? Okay, for some reason I cannot see the results. Okay, seems like majority of you is calling from Lebanon, and majority of you is using CVA for GBV outcomes from Lebanon today. Then looks like we have quite a few from Syria, Palestine, Afghanistan. I can see Jordan, Syria, Yemen, Turkey, Egypt, and Iraq, which is quite a good bunch. And that's great to hear from you where you are actually implementing the activities. And with that, now that we know where you are mostly active, I'd like to leave the floor to Elena Bertola the regional CVA specialist for UNFPA, who is going to give us a snapshot of program models and lessons learned from the region. Elena, over to you.
Thank you, Paola, and welcome everybody, and thanks for the introduction. So today I'm going to talk about UNFPA approach for cash within GBV case management in the Arab region, which is maybe a bit wider than MENA, but is where we have the most experience from. So cash assistance in GBV case management is really becoming the flagship cash and voucher approach within UNFPA globally. And is currently implemented by UNFPA in 9 countries in operation across the Arab region and the Syria response, namely in Jordan, Lebanon, Northwest Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Sudan, Somalia, Turkey, and Yemen, out of 15 countries worldwide. So it's here really that we are building our experience, evidence, and knowledge. So we all aware that women and girls affected by complex crises in their region often face increased gender-based violence, being within their household or in the hands of external perpetrator. So UNFPA, as part of a coordinated response to GBV in emergency, together with its partners, provide cash assistance within a structured GBV case management process for survivors, alongside all the other services, with the primary goal of mitigating GBV risk and responding to GBV consequences specifically. And we use the combined approach of piloting, replicating successful model in the field with the continued evidence building and model strengthening. So the different models are designed to consistently gauge what works best and what can be improved. We've seen that how cash is shown to be dignified, discreet, and flexible, helping survivors to escape violence and violent relationship, seek emergency care, and secure temporary shelter. Next, please. So all GBV survivors and women at risk for within our program for UNFPA that are under case management are actually eligible for cash assistance. However, not in every case, cash will be the right tool to accompany survivor in the fulfillment of their action plan and hearing process. So here the key analytical question is really whether the cash would contribute to reducing the risk of GBV or supporting the recovery of survivor, given the identified situation and the case characteristic, alongside all the other services. And when other services cannot cover those needs, for example, when referrals are not available or services come with a cost. So in those cases, cash really becomes part of the individual case action plan, where survivors, together with their case managers, identify cash as a complementary action to reduce the risk of GBV and or support recovery. So potential risks are associated with the cash assistance are really unpacked with the survivor, also including those related to a specific delivery mechanism. And all of that fits in a cash safety plan specific for each case. So as I said, sometimes specialized services come with a cost. There can be a barrier for survivors, such as transport, legal, or some specialized medical services that are not available through referrals. So one-off cash can be a tool to overcome these barriers, while medium longer term recurrent cash can also help GBV survivors to healing process, choose to move to a safe space, rebuild a livelihood. We go next. So here we have just a few quotes looking at what actually cash allowed our beneficiary survivors to do. So I'm just leaving you 1 second to read through. Okay, we go next. So the different models that we apply in the region. So of course we have different implementation modalities. So we piggyback on other UN agency, or we deliver through our implementing partner, but also directly implement as UNFPA. For example, in Palestine, UNFPA partner with WFP through a UN agreement to deliver cash through the WFP payment card, and in Egypt partner with UNHCR to disburse cash through the post office. But and in Lebanon, we are delivering recurrent cash assistance through a direct contract with a money transfer company, alongside also the cash delivered directly for emergency cash by our IP. While in other situations, like in Jordan, in Northwest Syria, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Sudan, in Turkey, the cash is delivered through the IP, either directly, like cash in hand or checks, or through a financial service provider, such as mobile money, money transfer, hawala, and bank transfer. So here, the key aspect is really to the survivor-centered approach and the survivor-centered focus, where we provide multiple options available for the survivor for each case, and to adopt that mechanism that would be the best, the safest place, the safest, the most familiar, the delivery mechanism that will offer and the most discretion. In terms of frequency, occurrence, and amount, we also adopt different approaches according to the context and according to the need of the survivor. We go next. So here I'm just presenting what we've been launching a few weeks back, the study with the Johns Hopkins University Center for Humanitarian Health. So the key funding of a research study from our initial pilot program, where we can see how cash within the case management response really helped mitigating risk, improved household relationship, supported the psychological well-being, at the same time supporting decision-making by the survivors, but also maintaining safety and reducing the challenges of accessing cash. We can go next. So also in Lebanon, where we conduct also robust monitoring for both the one-off cash for emergency response and the recurrent cash, we are having very positive results, where we really look at the exposure to sexual exploitation and harassment and the specific GBV risk that were disclosed by the survivors, and how much cash has been contributing to that. And similarly, in other countries, we have similar positive results, such as in Yemen, where 90% of the recipient of cash reported that cash contributed significantly to obtain the necessary service to recover from the incidents of violence that they disclosed. And alongside with Egypt, where respondent also reported the same. Next. Okay, so, slide went a little bit off. So lesson learned for Scale Up. So our first step is really to identify in advance what are the GBV-related situations which cash could be an appropriate and relevant response, to really provide the framework together with the GBV expert and staff and our case manager to identify what are also the risks associated to providing cash to each specific situation. Then very important is the organization of safe data protection and service practices, looking at also the introduction of third actors, such as the financial service provider, but also our cash colleagues. And we really found that the definition of an exit strategy at the beginning of the process is very crucial, not to arrive at the end of the cash assistance and basically finding the survivor still needing to continue or to extend the cash assistance. We also found that to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness through accepting external referrals. We have example in Northwest Syria, in Jordan, and also in Lebanon, where we have been able also through our partner to accept referrals through other GBV actors that were not UNFPA implementing partner. And then again, let me stress, the evidence building, the learning, the monitoring, the dissemination, and the reapplication of learning. But UNFPA now, we are really recommending that cash assistance is an option in every well-functioning case management program. Next. So here are some of the resources that we already produced that you can find on the web, and also the resources from the GBV subcluster work along with the Cash and Market Working Group that we're also going to look at today in other sessions, where UNFPA, but all the members of the GBV subcluster have been contributed to the production of country-specific SOPs for cash within case management. So I hope that I stayed on time, and back to you, Paola.
Thank you, Elena. That was great. And I can see we have some activities in the chat box. We will collect the question and have a moment of conversation later on. We will gather all your questions and pick them later on. So at this point, we can move to the next slide. And the next bit of our session today is a conversation with the community of practice at national and global level, which is led by Tenzin Manel, Associate Director for Cash and Livelihood at Women and Refugee Commission, and also co-chair of the Global Task Team on Cash for Protection. So Tenzin, over to you.
Thanks so much, Paola. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, okay. Thanks everyone. So I want to share a bit around the global coordination and community practice around cash for protection. So the Global Task Team on Cash for Protection was established in 2017. Our goals are to increase knowledge, the effectiveness and quality of programs that are using cash and voucher assistance for protection outcomes across areas of responsibility and for protection generally. I co-chair the task team with colleagues at Save the Children, and our membership is quite strong. We have over 50 members across 30 different organizations and agencies. We have INGO members, NGO members, UN agencies, donors, some independent consultants, and our membership is open, so you're welcome to join. I wanted to flag some of our key achievements. So to date, we've mapped evidence on using cash for our protection outcomes across child protection, GBV, housing, land and property, and mine action as well. We facilitated the development and endorsement of a stock-taking paper that draws the line in the sand as to how we should all be moving forward on cash for protection. We developed a number of tip sheets. So these are practical short resources for field colleagues that focus on using cash across these outcome areas, as well as for COVID-19. We have dedicated focal points for the AORs who participate in the task team regularly and to facilitate that two-way communication and coordination. And we've also, as of this year, been doing more direct field support. So we established a task force to look at the Ukraine regional response specifically and how cash for protection outcomes can be advanced within that response. Next slide, please, and thank you. So over the next few years, we're going to continue strengthening coordination, looking at the regional country levels and global levels, of course. Our membership is committed to generating more and more evidence on the use of CVA for protection outcomes, including GBV outcomes, and also continuing to map evidence. So as new evidence comes online, we will be updating those maps, and we're developing a resource library so that that evidence is accessible to you all, is searchable in a user-friendly way, and also that the evidence gaps are clear so that programming continues to advance as research continues to advance their efforts to bridge those gaps. Over the next 2 years, we'll have better capacity to provide more field support. So we're developing a help desk that will be harmonized but not duplicate other help desks. So this one will focus specifically on cash for protection and have communication with the other help desks across the other AORs. We will expand and develop new training. So the trainings that Paula flagged, we'll continue to iterate them based on needs to roll them out globally across regions. And our current resources will focus on CVA for protection outcomes broadly, as well as across the AORs. We'll continue workshop initiatives like this one to support uptake of new skills and knowledge, to strengthen coordination and response, and we'll continue to develop field resources based on demand, such as tip sheets and other resources that can be helpful. Next slide, please. We're currently working on tracking cash for protection, so programming and research, and consolidating that in a way that is easily accessible in multiple languages, and also a visualization so that we can see the concentration and distribution of cash for protection across the globe. In follow-up to this workshop, you'll receive a link to feed into this cash for protection matrix where we're tracking this work. And I warmly invite you and hopefully invite you to feed into that. So your input is needed to capture the locations where you're doing cash for protection, including cash for GBV outcomes programming, what protection outcomes your cash is designed to address, the populations you're serving, including details on subpopulations, the transfer value, your donors, and more. Next slide, please. So I want to show you an example of the map that we've developed for the Ukraine response based on the details from that matrix so that you can see how your inputs will be used and how helpful it will be. You can see that coverage is searchable by protection outcome and other filters. And you can see how, in some locations, there's more cash for protection than others, and maybe there's opportunities here to, avoid duplication and ensure coverage, and that cash for protection is being, taken forward. So that concludes my short presentation of what we're up to at the global level. I want to now hand over to colleagues who are working across the MENA region in coordination between cash and voucher assistance and GBV communities of practice to share their achievements and priorities going forward as well. So I'll turn over to Reem Kamis, who is UNFPA's GBV program specialist, GBV subcluster coordinator for Turkey cross-border, and also co-lead of the joint CVA GBV task force for Northwest Syria, and also Faye Kagestani, who is CALP's MENA region cash and markets expert and co-lead of that CVA GBV task force for Northwest Syria. So Reem, please over to you to share your key achievements and priorities from the Northwest Syria context. Thanks.
Well, thanks a lot, Tenzin, and hello, everyone. I was assigned to 5 minutes. I might be taking a little bit more. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to share with you very quickly on the work that we've been doing in the northwest of Syria. But maybe before I start, I just want to say a few words so that I can explain why we've been doing so much work on advancing the agenda of CVA for GBV programming in this particular context. So just a couple of points about the context of the northwest of Syria. First of all, unfortunately, many of the essential GBV services that we would have in other contexts, such as safe shelter and legal aid, are simply not available in our context for many different reasons that I won't get to now. Since 2018, 2019, CVA was identified as something that we could use to basically fill or try to fill those gaps to a certain extent and to contribute to achieving GBV outcome. The other point I wanted to flag was that in our context, and particularly in 2020, when that was the moment when we decided to come together as CVA and GBV actors and work better together, there was a rising number of GBV reported incidents that were experienced by women and girls in the northwest of Syria. And we all know that the combination of different factors such as COVID-19, the prolonged humanitarian crisis in Syria, as well as the economic crisis that the country has been experiencing, have all contributed to this rise in GBV trends. So in 2020, the coordination teams from both the GBV subcluster and the cash working group decided to get together and basically work towards a common objective, which was to scale up the integration of CVA within GBV programming. We basically established a joint task force that was composed of, I think we ended up with 5 member organizations with 2 representatives from each organization, one that was a GBV actor, 1 CVA actor, and all member organizations were active in the northwest of Syria with both GBV services and CVA programming. And we also had a Syrian national co-lead of the task force, that is Shafak. The key project that was developed, I mean, we had a big agenda, a big work plan, but we ended up focusing on producing standard operating procedures. Back in, I think we were done in March 2021, and those SOPs were basically meant to establish parameters for both internal and external referrals from GBV to CVA in instances where CVA was deemed needed and appropriate for GBV survivors. That work of developing the SOPs took almost 6 months of intense work. And it's because we basically had to spend the first 3 months making sure that we speak the same language. So we really used a lot of time just to unpack some of the complex terms that we both use that are not necessarily very easy to understand by the other actors. So we talked about GBV case management and the parameters for that. We talked about the different cash modalities, multi-purpose cash assistance, and all of these other terms. And I truly believe that laying that foundation was really crucial for the work of the task force, and probably is something that we need to take into account in any kind of collaboration between GBV and CVA actors. So those SOPs were launched last year, and earlier this year in February, after 1 full year of basically having those SOPs out and live, and doing a lot of advocacy with some of our members just to make sure that we implement, we operationalize the guidance. But then, just like any other technical document, we basically realized that we needed to come together as actors into a physical workshop, intense discussions to really unpack those SOPs and try to operationalize them as much as possible. Out of that workshop, again, we basically were able to document a lot of learning. And one of the key findings of the workshop was that we needed to do more on the donor engagement side and to seek their endorsement of the SOPs. I think that was a key barrier that our members wanted us to work more on. So we followed up immediately after that, and we invited some of our key institutional donors to a briefing. We followed the same path of the joint task force. So we invited both GBV specialists as well as cash specialists from these donor entities, and we walked them through the SOPs, and we basically also shared our recommendations. And I think we were able to succeed in having their endorsement for the joint efforts. Last point I want to mention here under key achievement is a second workshop that was concluded only last month, which basically, it builds on the previous workshop objectives. This time it was, I should have mentioned, the first workshop was actually supported by IOM. The second workshop was jointly organized with CARE International and Women's Refugee Commission. And this time we basically also tried to see, since February, since the first workshop, what has happened, what progress we've made, and what are some of the emerging risks and mitigations that we could then update into the guidance. And it was really interesting to have 4 of our members that came forward and shared different models of how they've been able to integrate CVA for GBV, programming, particularly case management. Again, really exciting to see the progress that we've made, I think, since the launch of the SOPs and since the first workshop. Next slide, please. In terms of priorities, I don't know if I can dare to say the bulk of the work was already established, somehow it was already concluded, but obviously there's a lot more to do. So we need to continue to document lessons learned based on the most recent practical application of the joint SOPs. We'll obviously need to continue to support the pilot projects, and especially those that have those synergies that include coordination and referrals between GBV and CVA actors, and to advocate to expand and extend such projects as much as possible. And obviously continuing to liaise with our task force, with the additional members that we also had joining these 2 workshops, inviting them to joint learning events that would progress their mutual understanding of each other's work, and also lead to establishing a sort of local community of practice at the Northwest area level. I just want to share maybe just something positive that we looked at, especially during the last workshop, was the fact that since February, we had a lot more interest in CVA for GBV programming, not just from our operational partners, but also from our donors. So we were able to document, one particular project where a key donor for CVA and GBV had invested $300,000 for a CVA for GBV case management project, one project of $300,000 that would go in support of GBV case management through CVA. And another UN agency that also has allocated 25% of its big scale cash for work project to GBV survivors and other at-risk groups. Our SOPs advocate for at least 10%, but we had that UN agency going all the way forward, going all the way to 25%, which is really exciting. I think the colleagues will help share, maybe also circulate the SOPs and the global case study that we worked on that documents all of that learning and the work of the
Thanks
task
so much.
force. Thanks, over.
Thanks so much, Miriam. Really appreciate it. So now we're going to turn our focus to Iraq. So I'd like to introduce Annette Savoca, who is People in Needs Early Recovery Manager and co-lead of the Iraq Cash Working Group. So over to you, Annette. Thanks. I think we can move to the next slide.
Thank you very much, Tanzin. Thank you all. Very happy to be here to present the Iraq's achievements for GBV CBA coordination. So giving a little bit the context of Iraq right now. The humanitarian response in Iraq is now phasing out. In 2022, this was announced that the context of response in Iraq will transition to a more like stabilization, development, and durable solution context in 2023. So it is a crucial time of change that has also impacted the work of the coordination of GBV and CVA already this year. This comes with a lot of implications. So the system of the clusters will be actually deactivated in 2023. A lot of clusters are handing over some key tasks to the government and to some ministries with little variation. This is not for all clusters, but the majority is doing so. There has been a drastic decrease in funding for GBV in 2022 compared to 2021. So this is a little bit the context we are operating right now in. And in terms of efforts in coordination for this cross-sector coordination, the story is a little bit similar to what my colleague was presenting for Northwest Syria. So we have established a joint task force. It was a joint task force between Cash Working Group and GBV subcluster members. And the main aim was to harmonize practices on CVA for GBV, but also to mainstream GBV considerations and protection consideration in all sectoral cash, so CVA across all sectors. And for this reason, the task force was established in 2021, and there was a national work plan drafted for 2021-2022. In this national work plan was mainly focusing on capacity building on these two components, so CVA for GBV and mainstreaming of GBV consideration in CVA. The main achievements have been two workshops that we have hosted this year, one in June and the other one in August 2022, that take also a lot into account the transitional context of Iraq. So the first one was a workshop to identify CVA-associated GBV risks and mitigation strategies for both humanitarian and government-led social protection schemes in light of the transition for 2023. And then GBV mainstreaming for cash partners was the second one in August. Next slide, please. With the first workshop that I mentioned, the one in June, we have basically the aim was to compile a list of priority recommendations for mitigation and prevention of GBV risks in CVA, that have mainly the government as main interlocutor, but also humanitarian actors in the transition setting. This workshop culminated in a document that will be later on shared by Tanzin and Paula. I have highlighted here just a couple of key points of what was touched upon and what is contained in this document. So we have different macro issues that we are trying to address with those recommendations. So the first one is about the targeting and inclusion of vulnerable population in cash schemes. So considering that cash assistance is transitioning more into social protection led by the government, we want to make sure that individuals that are particularly vulnerable, such as GBV survivors, or for example, widows with perceived affiliation with ISIS, like with families with perceived affiliation with ISIS, are also included in the social protection schemes by the government. We know that this can be like sometimes women and GBV survivors can be particularly at risk of not being included and not being targeted, and also because there is an issue with the legal documentation of those vulnerable households. Then we have the second macro theme is regarding the transfer to the government management. So there is like a basic mistrust, and there is also the feeling from the side of beneficiaries, apparently, according to a World Bank study, towards transparency and trust in the local government to be able to support in social protection as humanitarian actors were doing before. So it is essential that in the transition context, capacity building is provided to government staff working in social protection, and those should include also GBV basic principles, PSCA, and safe identification and referral of cases. The fourth macro theme is the access to markets, and in this sense, women can be at particularly risk of theft, or sometimes GBV survivors might not want to go to cash out the money at the delivery point because of stigmatizations and risks related to their safety. So in these cases, the recommendation is to use as much as possible e-transfers and digital financial service providers as an option because it enables recipients to cash out at their own time and to also cash out smaller amounts of money. And the last recommendation pertains confidentiality and data protection. So it is important that in the transition, data protection protocols are established between humanitarian and cash actors and the government in order to have the possibility also to include referrals from the humanitarian actors to the government, but also to ensure that data protection is in place and best practices are maintained. And for this reason, another recommendation is to have neutral stakeholders such as humanitarian actors to monitor and do data spot checks after the transition, if possible. And over to you.
Thanks so much, Annette. Really appreciate it. So we're now going to turn to Jordan. For time, so we don't get behind, Lumna, please keep your comments to 5 minutes. I'd like to introduce you to Lumna Alkanda, who is Intersource's Protection Coordinator and also co-lead of the Jordan Cash for Protection Task Force. Over to you.
Thank you, Tanzan. Okay, for Jordan, the Cash for Protection Task Force started actually in 2020. And it was a close coordination and collaboration between the GBV sub-working group and the protection working group. And we immediately start to develop like 2 years work plan. The Cash for Protection Task Force contained now almost fixed 14 members. There is UN agencies, there is local actors, and there is also international actors. And for the Cash for Protection Task Force, it's practically now including all the best practices and collected all the type of the cash practically, or CVA modalities we have in Jordan. We usually focus on it. And in 2021, the Cash for Protection Task Force try as much as possible to identify and let's say set the objective for the task force. We try as much as possible to unify the terminology, eligibility criteria. And then after that, upon this, we actually produce a guideline. It's the Cash for Protection Guideline. It was nationally endorsed by the Protection Working Group and also the GBV sub-working group and even the Child Protection sub-working group. Also, at the same time, we start to produce the 4Ws reporting system, and almost the GBV sub-working group members and the cash for protection task force members, and even the SEA task force members, all of them now, they are reporting inside it, so we can, let's say, enhance the referral inside through the cash for protection task force. In the same time, we focus on doing a lot of training and workshop. Next slide, please. In this year, we are focusing mostly on sharing the best practices, and we dealing with case study with all members who have, let's say, the better, best practices and how they are adopted the CVA models they have. For example, during COVID-19, the way they are dealing with it, the way they are dealing with the CVA distribution, everything, we usually focus on these best practices and we share it with the members and we learn from it. Also, at the same time, we work closely with the GBV sub-working group to develop like a small guideline on CVA monitoring and evaluation. It was with the GBV sub-working group and UNFPA. Also, at the same time, now we are working with the GBV IMS task force and also GBV sub-working group to mostly focus on practically having more guideline, more specific for CVA and GBV in Jordan. Next slide, please. For this year also, and let's say for next year also, our priorities practically, we are working to enhance the referrals and support coordination between the task force members and other services. We try as much as possible coordinate and link the cash for protection members with the livelihood for exit strategy, because we always have this as an issue in Jordan. Also, we continue to share, of course, the best practices from IOM, different actors, whoever have the best practices. Usually they do presentation on case study and all these things. Also, at the same time, we focus on doing a training on safe referral, data protection and confidentiality versus reporting in RISE system. That's from my side. Thank you. I'm very
Thanks so much, Samna. Great timing too. All right. So without further ado, last but not least, we're going to turn our attention to Turkey. And Mohamed Al-Gabra is Care Turkey's livelihoods manager and also technical advisor for the CBI technical working group. Mohamed, over to you.
Thank you, Tanzan. So Turkey, it's not so different. We were looking into gaps in our CVA programming, and we've realized that the CVA actors and GBV partners are not well aligned in terms of response. So we've put together a task team on CVI and GBV risk mitigation, prevention, and response. And it was led by a few of the members of the cash working group. It was chaired by CARE and UNHCR. And through a series of meetings, we were able to identify, basically guidance that could be shared throughout Turkey for any NGO that is using CVA, for GBV risk prevention and response. Our journey was not very smooth at the beginning. We were finding interest generally in the topic, but reluctance for everybody to join, chip in, different working groups. And so we've heavily, we looked around and we found out for Northwest Syria, they had something that was already developed and looked very, very good. And we took that, and based on that, we've aligned it and contextualized it on Turkey response. You can move to the next slide, please. So we've had the 8 meetings, I believe, in total, and we've come to the final draft that is very, very soon will be ready. And our priorities for the future is to disseminate the guidance with INGOs, UN agencies, and donors, encourage everybody to use this guiding document to strengthen the capacity, to change or even develop policies that relates to CVA and GBV, and to proactively integrate cash and voucher programming into GBV prevention response. And last but not least, secure extra funding for that. So one of the things that we're advocating for is to have a specific amount into every program's budget to respond to any GBV case. And hopefully with the donors buy-in and everybody accepting the guidance that we're working on, we're going to reach that at some point.
Thanks, Mohamed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your achievements and priorities. It's incredibly impressive and great to hear how you're, kind of building this momentum and feeding off the learning across the different country contexts where you're working. We're going to switch gears into more of a discussion. But before we jump into my discussion questions, I just want to remind, and I'm also guilty of this, we should slow our pace a little bit to help the translators so that those listening in Arabic and Turkish have a better chance. So I want to unpack with you how you've contextualized global field tools in your unique operational context. What were the success factors in the process of adopting or adapting these global resources for your context? And if it didn't happen, why not? We're going to do a rapid round where each of you will have a minute to respond to this question. So first, I would like to ask Faye if you could share what those success factors were in Northwest Syria with respect to adapting global guidance. Over to you.
Hi, I apologize. I've been trying to fix my camera, but Tenzin, it's not a matter of not all the global guidance not not useful. It's more for us what we needed at that time in developing those SOPs that Reem summarized. But I think moving forward, there's so many tools that I think, as we have our community of practice, that we can continue to adapt. But I think it's worth. I mean, sometimes also there's I think this is so useful that we're having this, and because sometimes we need some form of curation, somebody to curate things for us, because there's just there's a lot of documents and resources and we never have the time to digest all of them. Over.
All right, thanks, Faye. Annette, over to you. In Iraq, what were some of the success factors of adopting global guidance? And if that didn't happen, why not?
Thank you so much, Tenzin. So I think that it's been a slow process for Iraq, mainly because of kind of the siloed work environment of the two clusters before the joint task force. So it's the GBV subcluster and cash working group were not necessarily meeting on a regular basis to discuss GBV and CVA practices. So that's been the gap was identified and the national work plan was created, but the timeline, it was also a little bit unfortunate because with the transition, it got it got a lot of attention and a lot of things were changing. The funding for GBV was also decreased a lot this year, so there was less attention to that specific topic. So some resources were contextualized and it unfortunately happened late, and the success factor on why that actually was could happen in the end was the creation of these workshops, these opportunities for sharing, both for cash and GBV actors, sitting together in the same room and discussing the priorities, or what was relevant, cross-sector. And this gave the opportunity to create this wonderful document, to create the momentum, also to translate a lot of documents, both in Kurdish and in Arabic, of the global guidelines, checklists. So I think this was the main success factor, but it was a slow run.
Thanks, Annette. And Libna, what about in Jordan? What were some of the success factors? Or if the challenges, why weren't the global guidelines necessarily pulled upon?
Actually, in Jordan, we try as much as possible to depend on the global CVA, let's say, materials. But also at the same time, we try as much as possible to capture what we have on the ground. And that's why we almost as much as possible, we included the different modality of the CVA present in Jordan. Why it did not happen completely? Because it was a very long process due to the COVID-19 lockdown. So it takes from us a very long time to produce this document. It's almost 1 year and a half, something like this. But the main aspects, the principle from the global guideline, it's there, but we, as much as possible, try to make it and adapt it to the context of Jordan and what's practically the CBA actor or CBA programming actors practically doing. Also, at the same time, we try to set like the basics for all actors who want to work actually or planned to work in the CBA in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Lubna. And Mohamed, over to you.
So for us, as I mentioned, we've heavily depended on CARE SOP for Northwest Syria, and we've able to take that. And with way few meetings and discussions than we've expected, we were able to contextualize that and make it relevant to Turkey context. But at the same time, first of all, we used the Compodium to get everybody on the same understanding of what we wanted to do, general understanding of where we're headed. And when we thought that we're going to start from scratch, we found that amazing SOP for Northwest Syria, and we based all of our discussions on that. And the major success, I believe, for us was the reduction in time needed to get to the final draft that we have today. So we've and we basically also benefit from the experienced people who prepared the SOP as well. So we had but for us, the major thing was that we were able to almost finalize in 8 months rather than a year and a half, which is amazing.
That's great. That's really impressive. And it's wonderful to, have us all remember that we're not reinventing the wheel, right? There's established global guidance and tools to support everyone in this process, that of course it should be context specific, and also that peer-to-peer learning that you all are mentioning, and those neighboring country SOPs that might not be that far off, right? But can be further refined. So thanks, that's really great to hear. My second question for all of you is, what's unique about your context and therefore your context-specific guidance? So Faye, I'd love to pass to you first for the Northwest Syria context.
Thank you. I think what's unique about our context is that there are a couple of champions, both on the GBV side and on the CASH working group side. I really think that that's one of those intangibles that if nobody's really pushing for it to put the same people in the room who need to be in the same room and talking and sharing, but I don't think we would have accomplished what we've accomplished. So maybe I'll take this opportunity to also commend Reem, my partner in crime, on the GBV side for really sticking with us and trying to achieve what we've achieved so far.
Great, thanks. Yes, champions are really important, and having that melding of the minds across the CASH and GBV aisles, so to speak, is really key. Thanks so much, Faye and Reem. Annette, you started to unpack this a little bit earlier, but what's unique about your context and therefore your context-specific guidance in Iraq?
Well, everything is turning around the transition right now in Iraq. So it's a very special moment. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of not knowing how this is going to look like in 2023. Is there going to be like any cash assistance that like goes, in parallel to the government? Like to what extent it will transition to like social protection schemes, and how basically the focus is now on how to build capacities of the government officials, representatives, departments that are involved in social protection, to allow the inclusion of the most vulnerable parts of the population, to mainstream GBV considerations, protection considerations, to make sure that the most vulnerable are basically not included because they lack civil documentation, they belong to a specific minority, they are stigmatized because of their experience, their like family affiliation. So this is very important, and this is what we like the discussion regarding GBV and CVA coordination has been focusing on, and also regarding also the transition now, the setting will a little bit change, because as I mentioned, there will be cluster deactivation, and before, aside from the task force, but the GBV subcluster was the main responsible for cash for GBV activities, or the coordination for those activities. Rather, now with the transition, we might transition into an independent body as like cash working group that will not be the same like cluster body that we are used to see, that will be more and more involved into the coordination for sector cash as well, providing also help to the government, hopefully. So over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Lubna, what about in Jordan? What's unique and how was that reflected in your guidance?
Okay, I would say, first of all, that is the positive, actually, unique, let's say, aspects in Jordan. It's the close collaboration and coordination between the protection working group and the GBV sub-working group and the GBV-IMS task force, which is actually, let's say, resulted in the guideline, the national guideline that's adopted nationally. And then after that, the close coordination to practically, let's say, focus more on having, let's say, CVA and GBV programming guideline, very specific to the GBV programming in Jordan. Also, at the same time, there is enhanced referral mechanism between the GBV IMS task force and GBV sub-working group, also the cash for protection task force. I would say this is definitely a unique aspect, and very positive, actually, unique characteristic here in Jordan. Also, what we have until now, we have as I say, under the cash for protection task force, we counted different type of CVA in Jordan. So people still have some kind of confusion when we are talking about multipurpose cash assistance, basic needs, and CVA in GBV, and the cash for protection, actually. The only thing, and the most important things that we are facing now, it's the limited funding, actually, opportunities here in Jordan. And this is definitely a recommendation from the GBV-IMS task force, the GBV sub-working group, and even the protection group. It's definitely the limited option of funding for CVA in GBV. Thank you.
Thanks, Lubna. All right, we'll hand it over to you. What's unique about Turkey, and how has this been reflected in your work?
So for us in Turkey, we have the largest cash program, the history of the EU, as I believe ESSN, or in short, Emergency Social Safety Net, covers around 1.6 million refugees in monthly cash assistance to cover their basic needs. But on top of that, on top of that, we have many different organizations also implementing cash and voucher programming. But we have also very huge challenges in that regard, and one of them is the very big inflation that Turkey is facing, where based on last month's data shared by the Central Bank of Turkey, inflation reached 83% on an annual basis. So if we program for any assistance today, in a year, the value of our support will relatively drop by 83%. That is something that every cash and voucher agency here in Turkey is aware of and working to mitigate. But the upside of the response in Turkey is that, first of all, since most of the basic needs are covered through this ESSN program, we are more focused on supporting people at risk of GBV or to cover protection-specific needs. The last thing that I want to share is donors are very present and active in our working groups, specifically the cash-based intervention working group, and they are involved in our discussions. So hopefully it would be easier to convince and get donors buy-in on the new guide that we're working on, and to have a specific percentage specifically for CVA and GBV. So yeah, that's it for us for Turkey.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks
all of you for sharing. We're miraculously a little bit ahead on time, so we're gonna take one question from the audience, which is as follows, and I'd like to give each of you again one minute. So the question is, can you please provide examples of successful exit strategies in your context for CVA integrated GBV programming? What were successful, referrals to livelihoods, exit strategies, and we'll go in the same order. So Faye, to you, if there's something you want to share from Northwest Syria. Faye, are you there?
Hi, sorry, I was talking.
No worries, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you say that, was there a question?
Yes, the question is, can you provide examples of successful exit strategies or how you've integrated exit strategies into your work?
All right. I think for now, what we mentioned earlier about, one of the things we developed with SOPs are very specific recommendations to different decision makers, donors, program managers, country directors, etc., and field staff. And one of the recommendations that we made was for a very proactive inclusion of a percentage of the caseload of cash implementing partners with secured funding of GBV, whether it's for livelihood-based interventions, whether it's for food security, etc. So I think that's been taken up, as you heard from Reem earlier, where partners are actually allocating a percentage when they do their project proposals specific to GBV support. So that's one exit strategy. But I think we have a lot of work still in terms of creating those referral pathways. Over.
Thanks so much, Faye. And Annette, over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something very much in the same line. So basically, what we have found being working is the linkage of cash assistance. In this case, it can be cash for GBV, but can be any other type of cash assistance with more long-term durable solutions. This is also in line of the optic of the transition in Iraq. So trying to link whatever type of cash assistance with a more like long-term approach. So trying to link the beneficiaries with other type of assistance that can be exactly can be livelihood, can be health, can be protection, but just like trying to create like an exit strategy for each case and provide like more longer term solutions. On this, the cash working group has actually developed a referral mechanism tool. This for now is like it works mainly for MPCA. But it links like the assessment tool that we already have with like an eligibility potentially to graduate to other sectors. So it's kind of like an automatic like graduation approach that we are trying to push for in the context for Iraq.
Great, thank you. And Lubna, what about in Jordan?
We are not that different actually from Syria or Iraq. We are doing the same thing. In the Cash for Protection Task Force, we try as much as possible to coordinate with other working group, like livelihood working group and basic needs as much as possible to find an exit strategy for the especially GBV and protection cases who receive CVA. It's still working in progress, and we're also encouraging the, let's say, Cash for Protection Task Force members and also the GBV supporting group members to link as much as possible the GBV programming with the basic needs and multipurpose cash assistance as an exit strategy. But this is what we have until now, and we are definitely working. Let's say it's work in progress to find like a suitable and documented exit strategy for Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mohamed, what about Turkey?
So we're basically doing everything the same, but I'll give you a practical example of how we handle a case where she's covered her basic needs and she is graduating from a basic need or a GBV support. So we took out one of our livelihoods programming and we've changed it a bit to be more suitable, let's say, to GBV survivors. And what we've came up with is a home-based business support program. And the support scheme is based on interest-free loans and technical support. Mainly, we receive internal referrals from our case management department, but at the same time, we accept external referrals as well. What we do for incoming cases is that we assess that if first they've covered all of their basic needs, they're well off now. And second, if they have a skill, a marketable skill that we can support directly, or if they would like us to support them to learn a marketable skill. Once the skill is identified, we support with an interest-free, collateral-free loan that can be paid over a period of a year, very small installments. And then we provide any other technical support or sometimes with materials or inputs. And the person is put within a larger group so they can have, you know, a network of people supporting them as well. We follow up with them for a period of a year until we are sure that their businesses or home-based businesses are profitable, they're fine with repayment of the loan, and then we offer them if they would like to continue for that program as a successful micro-entrepreneur. And that's where we consider that case is fully graduated and fully self-sufficient, because it's not only that they've received a loan and repaid it, but also accumulated some kind of profit that they can continue with their own businesses that they've established or expanded. So that is how we are. That's one of the ways. Of course, just like Lubna and everybody else said, we do referrals to other organizations. If, let's say, the person that reached us as livelihood department would like to learn more specifically a vacation, we would transfer them to a organization that is specifically providing vocational training or anything else. But for us, and with the program that we got approved and funded, is that we are providing this home-based business support program where we keep people within their own environment. We just support them with loans and technical support, hoping that they will be more self-reliant and have, you know, the personal agency to continue on their own.
Great, thank you for that practical example, and for all of your points around you know, ensuring coordination, the dynamics around internal and external referrals. You know, there's such great demand for livelihood support, but making sure that there's, you know, enough supply, so to speak, and also what some of the facets of program models can look like for linking GBV survivors to livelihoods programming in addition to cash assistance within GBV case management. And thank you again for your presentations and the, I think, very insightful and helpful discussion. Thank you for sharing your experiences. So Paula, I'll pass back to you to share key takeaways from the previous workshops we have done in MENA. Over.
Thanks, Tenzin, and thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed hearing from you, and from this moment onward, I'll try to be quite quick and summarize what you have said, and also to summarize what happened in the previous workshop that have happened in September. Can we go to the next slide? So as you heard from colleagues and presenter, during the month of September, we had the chance to gather twice, first in Gaziantep and then in Amman. And the two workshops have been coordinated and co-led by, of course, WRC and CARE, but from UNFPA, CALP, the GBV subclusters and the cash working group, UNHCR, and all the panelists that you heard so far have been very helpful and led the conversation in their respective location. So some of the suggestions you already heard from them, and some are very specific to each country, while some others are more global and they can be taken forward in the whole region. We can move for the next slide. So when we gather in Gaziantep, we come up with some good proposals, and some of them that are already up and running or about to. So you already heard about the idea and the possibility to have an additional and a new GBV and CVA community of practice in order to have more possibility to run activities together and keep breaking the silos that are still existing. In terms of advocacy, you've seen, you've heard from Faye directly how it would be good to, and it is about to be put into practice, how to allocate a percentage of funded CVA case load to support referred GBV cases. And moreover, we had the chance to hear from some of the participants in the workshop how important it is to bridge internal gaps and make sure that our programmings are integrated. In terms of external referrals, then a good suggestion is, of course, to have MOU already established and in place. So when it comes to refer case to some other organization, or the paperwork is already sorted and the process can be smoother. In terms of SOPs, of course, good to have them and to keep them alive. You've seen and you heard from some of the presenter that there are some new upcoming and some other are already actually in place and used. So keep updating them, keep using them, and keep sharing the lesson learned, additional documents that, of course, paramount to keep sharing the knowledge between ourselves. And from the same workshop, we also heard how important it is to involve the community, of course, and how good it is to have a community committee, which is useful in terms of consultation to better know the people we are working with, and also to support us in raising awareness around GBV and gender in general. Next slide. When it comes to the challenges, of course, there are still some pain points which are open and there for discussion. As much as we are trying to work together, there is still quite a bit of a siloed environment which can affect the activity implementation. As you heard from Faye, we face a decrease in funding, and this affects both sides. The maximization of the GBV support that we could provide, but also it affects the possibility to have specific training on safe referrals for our staff and practitioners on the ground. And it affects also the possibility to have harmonized approaches and tools. When it comes to data protection and sharing of data, there was also a question in the chat box, which I saw from some of you. We're still in the process of finding out which is the best way to reconcile all of it, and also to make sure that we are able to report what is needed without sharing sensible information, which can put survivors into further harms. If we can go to the next slide. We also gathered in Amman, and you heard some experiences in Jordan from Lubna, where we definitely have a continuous and strong effort to bring different actors and sectors together in order to have a better integrated programming. in Jordan, there has been an effort in harmonizing the transfer value and circulating standard SOP, which makes easier the cash components of it. We've definitely seen how having a flexible grant and an alternative delivery mechanism is the best way forward in order to make sure that we reach all people we want to serve, which might not be able to use one specific delivery method, and therefore it's good to have a plan B and a second option for them. Specifically to Jordan, we also saw during the workshop how good it is to have an application such Amali, which is used to combine referral, and it can be used by different actors at the same time. And it is a tool, one of those recent technological tools that can help in supporting better referrals. If you go to the next slide, we also have some challenges coming from Jordan, in which one of the biggest issue came out is the lack of ID for people who are crossing the border and getting into country, maybe legally, or they had lost their paper during their transit. So for them, not having an ID, it's a real challenge because it affects the whole intake for them into the UNHCR programs, which is registering everyone who gets into Jordan. You heard and you discussed with the panelists how important it is to have strong exit strategy and how relevant it is to have a link with the livelihood sector. Unfortunately, what we realize is that the demand is there, but the offer doesn't quite match it yet. In Jordan, there is a WW's type of document, which is there and it is utilized, but we realized that we could use it even better and do more with that to make sure that everyone has the right idea about who is doing what, where, which helps, of course, coordination and makes the upcoming new activity easier to be planned. Same as in Turkey and same as you heard from colleagues, we still have some question around which data is good to share and how to handle that and who has to handle those data, which are the basic ones that we really need and which are the ones that we can drop because we don't need them, and there's no reason for us to ask them, and there's no reason for the entire team of each organization to know those data in order to maintain safety and security for the GBV survivors. We discussed as well the need of having additional funding in order to move from a pilot type of stage up to a scale-up moment in order to have a greater reach and also to have a more inclusive reach, because we realized that people with different sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics are still not quite served, and further effort is needed in that regard. So we are really much about time, but I want to take the opportunity to share something with you and to have the possibility to grab your brains. For this reason, I'm going to drop a link in the chat and you should all be able to access it. Do please click on the link, get on Mentimeter, and answer the question, what do you think is missing from the key takeaway that have just been shared, and based on your experience to improve working on CVA for GBV outcomes. Take some moments and type down your answer, so we should seeing it popping up on the screen. You guys need to use the code that you can see on top of the screen. If it is asked, you need to enter the code, which is up in the screen, 54061029, and you will be able to type in your question. You can see it on the screen. I can see that some of you are typing in. I can see we have some suggestions, such as keep working on data protection, including LGBTQIA+ community, keep the support for GBV, including people with disability, definitely another group that needs support. Don't forget male and boy survivor as well. We need case management, standard operator procedure, and some of them are already existing and can be shared later on. I can see that the cloud is being populated. We need some more sensitization and joint programming, sustainable exit strategy, keep sharing lesson learned, having a graduation approach, that's a good one, which can be used to improve the exit strategy. All right, thank you. Thank you everyone who inputted in the word cloud. We can keep it alive for a few more seconds. So you guys can keep typing in case you haven't had a chance. At the top of the screen, you can see the code. So you can keep entering your question in the word cloud. But considering that we are right on time at this point, I think we can break up here for a moment of break. And if you want to use the cloud or use the chat box, we will monitoring it during the break and maybe get back to it later on together with our donors and panelists. So it's 1 p.m. my time, should be 3 p.m. In your time zone. And so we can take a 30 minutes break. We will come back for the second bit of the event where we will have conversation with donors and local organizations. So during these 30 minutes, feel free to move up, grab a glass of water, have a coffee, have lunch, quickly check your email that at this point probably is exploding. And I'll see you later, right on time in 30 minutes. Once we are back, I'll try to grab your attention again to make sure that you're all back. Thank you, and I'll see you later. All right, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had the chance to take a bit of a break. And before to resume, I just want to make sure that we are online with all the panelists we need. Wissam, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. All good. Welcome. Good. So to make sure that you guys are back from your break, could you kindly type something in the chat or wave your hand or shake something, make sure that we have a crowd back with us. Yes, I can see people are back. Yes, you're back. All right, perfect. Good to know that you are joining us back. For this second bit of the event, the housekeeping rules are the same of the first one. I'm just going through them quickly again. We'll be together up to 5 p.m. Eastern European Summer Time. If you want to interact with us, please use the chat function. We should have time to have a moment of dialogue with you. Your microphones are muted by default. So if you want to speak up, you need first to raise your hand and we will unmute you. The event is recorded and we will share the recording once it's done together with a pack of resources that we might, we hope you might find useful. And I think we are good to go. I can see that people are coming back. That's good. You're all greeting us in the chat box. Thanks for doing that. We can move to the next slide. So at this point, without taking any other time from the next panel, I'd like to introduce you Chris Chama, Deputy Regional Representative for CALP Network in the MENA region. And with this, Chris, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Paula. It's a pleasure to join you all today. I've been listening in from the start of this exciting and important workshop. And it just goes to show the collective efforts and the work that has been ongoing at all levels, but also the work that we still have to do. We actually just finished the MENA, CVA and GBV webinar series, which covered Northwest Syria, Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. And there's quite interesting learning that was shared by the practitioners, many of whom I'm happy to say are here with us on the panel today, and I'm very happy to be talking with them again. So first of all, gender-based violence is a result of gender norms and gender inequality, among other factors. But we do have enough evidence to say that it is further exacerbated by economic crises, conflict, marginalization, and many more serious and systemic problems. And so when we talk about CVA and GBV, we need to factor in the wider environment that can either be enabling or paralyzing for survivors and equally humanitarian actors trying to reach these communities or survivors. Second, survivors and individuals at risk of gender-based violence with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and sex characteristics, individuals living with disabilities, adolescents, and male survivors are often left out of programs or face risks and even discrimination when accessing services. One size does not fit all, and it's not only ineffective and in contrast to a survivor-centered approach, but it may also expose recipients to further harm if the cash assistance is not appropriately designed for their recovery and to mitigate exposure to risks. Basically, we need to avoid transferring risks. Third, and I'll leave it at 3 for now, cash for gender-based violence outcomes and multi-purpose cash are not mutually exclusive, but are both necessary and complementary. When cash for GBV and MPCA are not harmonized, survivors triage their needs and often cover basic needs, leaving their protection needs unfulfilled. So getting it right really does require proper coordination sufficient funding, but also appropriate program design. So with that, I'd like to kick off this session with colleagues that are working with local organizations from MENA, as we hear from them about the successes, challenges, and their vision for a way forward. So first off, I would like to introduce Amani Kanjo from Northwest Syria. She works with the Syria Relief and Development Organization and is a protection and gender-based violence technical advisor with more than 8 years of experience supporting humanitarian aid organizations in Syria predominantly. She's also active in various task forces and leads on various initiatives. So Amani, over to you to share successes, challenges, and the vision for the way forward from your perspective.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and everyone who participated and make this event happen again, as you mentioned. So regarding the successes and outcomes, actually, when we heard from the survivors themselves in the field, we found that the CASH and CVA not only helped those survivors to recover from incidents of violence and reduce the exposure to further or future risks of GBV, but also improved economic autonomy and capacity, personal well-being and well-being of survivors' children as well, interpersonal relations with the family members, and interactions with the host community. So this was the whole altogether with the benefit of such integration of CVA and GBV. That was really remarkable as a success. However, for some challenges and difficulties that we found at field is that short-term funding for such projects and programs of integration actually leaving us of not noticing and tackling the impact of the integration of GBV and CVA due to short funding. So kind of less than 1 year of funding actually not showing the positive part of the work. In regards to the vision, as Reem has mentioned, for Northwest Syria, we need to, and we are aiming to engage all donors to support this kind of integration of CVA and GBV programming. Also, like in Northwest Syria, we are shifting from emergency to nexus phases. So we are always like looking forward seeing like sustainable and recovery interventions more than emergency so far after this long term. So this kind of things. And last, like such South-South learning events, the one that we are in right now is really helping us for expanding our experiences and learning more from lessons of other contexts, specifically in the region itself. So this is what I can add so far. Thank you, Chris, and everyone.
Thanks, Amani, and that's an excellent start. I really like the South-South learning, and it's an excellent reminder that gender-based violence survivors, you know, it's a shock to begin with, but then the recovery and the reintegration and for them to actually continue with their lives, that's a much longer process. Next up, I would like to invite Tara Ashur. Tara Ashur is a human rights activist and program coordinator with Women Empowerment Organization. based in Iraq with over 5 years of experience in managing gender-based violence programs. Tara is also a member of various social movements in MENA and globally. Tara, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy here to share our successes and challenges and the vision forward. So first of all, I would like to say that it was the first time we implemented cash flow protection project with our organization in 2020 during COVID actually, but thankfully the project came on a big success, and I will share with you one of the successes. So the project came on the right time and had respond to women's need in a very difficult circumstances at the time, which was COVID-19. And the second success was the division of and segregation of the duties and responsibilities among the project team to ensure confidentiality. And the third success was the delivery mechanism to the GBV survivors, which was cash in hand. And this has proven it is the best way to deliver cash for the GBV survivors, which is cash in hand, especially at the COVID-19. But we had other challenges as well. One of the challenge was also the COVID lockdown and restriction on movement. It has actually affected the follow-up, and also there were a global monitoring and evaluation tools that we were not aware of, unfortunately. The second challenge is, of course, as Amani mentioned, is the short-term implementation project and the lack of sustainability, because the project was only for 6 months and we had a very short term to follow up after the project ends. The third challenge is the anti-fraud and the auditing requirements that the finance staff had or needed to follow to be in compliance with the donors was actually or can be at odds with a survivor-centered approach. And this approach, we always follow the survivor-centered approach. However, our vision for the way forward is, of course, strengthening the internal capacity and revise the SOPs based on lessons learned and best practices, and also build internal capacity to cover both CVA and GBV program components. The second vision that we have is building a strong protection, monitoring, and evaluation unit, not only male team, but a protection male team. And the third one is actually like a recommendation more than a vision, which is we hope to have increased and flexible funding, including the long-term funds to allow the local organizations working to rapidly scale up and adjust their response through the most appropriate response modality. So this is from me, and over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. And it really sheds light on how funding and its various aspects, from requirements to flexibility to duration, but also the wider environment, play a big role in how things continue. Next up, I would like to introduce Wissam Shaib to everyone. Wissam is the co-lead of the Tajassud Trans Working Group at Kurras in Lebanon and works as a program manager for emergency and humanitarian aid. Wissam is a trans activist and has more than 10 years of experience working with both international and grassroots organizations on human rights and advocacy. Wissam, thank you for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, my fellow panelists, for this wonderful opportunity. I'm very honored to be on this panel with you all. I would like to kick off a little bit, maybe in reverse to everyone else, speaking from a community perspective and from a beneficiary perspective, rather than a service provider perspective, and that would be the complementary aspect between everyone who's present here and how we all complement each other. I just want to make sure you're hearing me clearly because I've been having some technical problems with my sound. So to begin with, just to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face in Lebanon, specifically as a trans community and specifically as a community who's been recently targeted with an intense crackdown on LGBT movement in Lebanon, which caused a spiral down of violence and crackdowns and shutdowns of spaces and events. To talk a little bit about this in terms of not only a state violence, but also the lack of responses from agencies and service provider to contain or support any. Is this better?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Wissam, if you could just hold the.
Yeah.
That should work. Thank you.
No worries. To contain or support any gender-based violence victims who suffered from that crackdown and from that retaliation of the state or retaliation of the supporters of the state, because it took a lot of layers of violence in that sense. And additionally, not to limit it only to that sense of violence, but also the current economic situation in Lebanon, the banking systems and the banking restrictions and the lack of access to finances by the trans community themselves, lack of access to services, has increased and doubled and amplified due to the current situation. And on top of that, the explosion that took place in 2020 and the deterioration of the infrastructure in which the majority of the trans community as well live in areas, and the LGBT community live in areas surrounding that premises of the explosion, where people who suffered from loss of shelter or loss of income or loss of livelihood as well did not find proper means and channels for referrals towards cash and voucher assistance. And that goes back to the lack of funding that is specifically dedicated and tailored for trans individuals, that does not take into account the specific and the particularity of that funding, of that experience. Yes, this is a gender-based violence beneficiary, but also it has a lot of particularity in that sense, and that's why one size fits all doesn't work in these cases, and it's not applicable. So that's one of the challenges that we face. But luckily, I think since the beginning of the financial crisis, and since the beginning of as well the COVID-19, which hit the medical infrastructure really hard in the beginning of 2020 in Beirut. I think what we did is that we started shifting our work towards more advocacy and mobilizing towards a proper service provision as well, including creating informal networks of support that includes also fundraising and providing financial aid among small groups who are able to do that fundraising in itself. Also adapting the work more towards advocacy and working closely with organizations and agencies to identify gaps, to look into pre-existing services and pre-existing activities that are being done in order to support the community, and also capitalize on this. How can we work amongst each other instead of duplicating the work and push forward towards a better service provision that is also safe and that also factors in these individuals. Also, hopefully, this has been a very recent work. We're still trying also to find our ground. Like I said, there's no specific funding that targets emergency and services like direct services for trans individuals in the sense that is specific for these communities. But our vision is to also create hopefully we'll be able to create a self-funded cash-based support system as well that is that understands the particularity of trans individuals, that understand the particularity of that community, that dependent on allies and supporters and peers, which is also through capitalizing on the collective work, including the community in decision making and in the design process, across generations, across race, across different experiences, and also redefining the idea of participatory approach. I know in development we talk a lot about being adaptable, about including the community, about focusing on participatory approach, but also what does it mean when the community is a very specific community and doesn't fit usually in the mainstream design of projects. So I think this is from my end. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Over and out.
Thank you, Wissam. And again, shedding light on how gender identities differ in experiences and as a result, access, let alone availability within different crises that different communities might be experiencing. Up next, I would like to introduce you to you all, Melody Aysam. She is working in Turkey with Positive Living Associations. She's been working in the field for more than 4 years. And earlier this year, she has been working as the IPA officer who is responsible for the evaluation, development, and monitoring of all individual protection assistance provided within the scope of the projects under PLA. So Melody, over to you to hear a bit more about your experiences from Turkey in terms of successes, challenges, and your vision and way forward.
Thank you, Chris. And hello, everyone. I am Melody, and I will mention about our projects briefly. They have 2 projects, one of them Key Refugee Group projects and one of them Men and Boys projects. Key Refugee Group projects target groups LGBTI refugees, refugee sex workers, and refugees living with HIV. And Men and Boys project targets groups, men and boys who are survivors of and/or risk of sexual violence. We have been providing HIV legal and psychosocial counseling, GBV case management, and awareness raising activities. Also, we have been providing transportation, accommodation, translation, and notary fee since 2019. And rent assistance since 2020. Let's talk about our some successes. Providing a safe space for target groups who are affected by GBV in acute situation and removing them from the cycle of violence. In a holistic case management sense regarding their needs, beneficiaries who are survivors of GBV are provided transportation and accommodation, then supported them with rent assistance so that they can make a fresh start in a new safe area. Being able to provide this assistance within our organizations gives us speed and agility in case management. The fact that the beneficiaries holistically receive support from the one association also provides a reduction in their stress levels. So we are a facilitator with the assistance provided for the identification process, the beneficiaries who are affected by GBV, like translation or notary assistance and legal counseling, and empowering the target groups and increase their access services by assistance in case management with a holistic approach with the assistance. So in addition, all this empowered them by providing counseling and awareness activities. We have some challenges also. Irregular migrants and unregistered asylum seekers, refugees, cannot access services in Turkey easily. So this causes disruption in case management as well. Our assistance is affected by these situations because some, for example, hotels and transportation companies do not provide services without identity cards. So the other one, due to variability of economic conditions in Turkey, socioeconomic sensitivity has increased. So this situation causes the assistance to be short-term and a temporary solution. So the other one we faced is that our target groups are subject to discrimination and stigma based on their gender identity, sexual orientation, and HIV status, and etc. We are faced with this situation in the assistance we provide, as well as accessing services provided in the country. For example, again, in various provinces, hotels might not accept trans people who are provided with accommodation assistance, or the landlords do not want to rent out their houses during the rental process. And we have some post-distribution monitoring methods. The first one is a survey on the safety and well-being of people after assistance. And the second is to get their feedback by conducting focus group discussion with beneficiaries who are provided assistance. And however, we are also planning how to develop our own methods by following the recently developed methods. We provide specialist services to our target groups. However, they may face discrimination while receiving services from different institutions. So, the capacity of institutions may be insufficient while providing services. In order to reduce the problems faced by our beneficiaries and to ensure that they have access to the right information in accessing the service, we organize advocacy activities and training for the employees of NGOs, public and local institutions working in the field, and we will continue to do.
Thank you so much, Melody. And again, as I hear from each one of you from different contexts, it's really easy to see how the environment itself will change how everything actually happens. So for example, in Turkey, there's a lot more opportunities for linkages and piggybacking off of existing national systems and services, but this does not mean that it can cater to everyone. And really identifying these niche persons and groups is very important to make sure that they're not forgotten. Next up, I would like to invite Sarah Sumren. She's from Jordan, and she works with the Jordan Women's Union. Sarah is a GBV-IMS focal point and CVA facilitator. She's also a psychologist and a coach on the global team for GBV case management. Sarah, good to see you again, and over to you.
شكرا كريس، شكرا للجميع. أنا مضطرة إني أحكي بالعربي، وشكرا إني موجودة معكم اليوم. بداية احنا في اتحاد المرأة الأردنية تصدى لمواجهة العنف ضد النساء تقريبا من عام 1993، وفتحنا أول برنامج خط إرشاد أو خط ساخن في عام 96، وبعديها فتحنا مأوى للنساء المعنفات وهو كان الأول في المنطقة عام 1999. هلا من المعيقات أو أهم المعيقات منذ بدء افتتاح المأوى اللي واجهناها كان في احتضان السيدات، وهو إعادة إدماجهم مرة أخرى ضمن ظروف إنسانية تسمح لهم العيش بكرامة. والمعلوم والمعروف للجميع أن معظم هؤلاء السيدات بيتعرضوا للعنف هن من غير العاملات وليس لديهم مصدر دخل مستقل، ولأنه هناك غياب تام لبرامج الحكومة اللي تعنى بالعناية اللاحقة للمعنفات، وليس هناك أي حماية اجتماعية تضمن للمرأة العيش الكريم بعد التخلص من العنف الموجه ضدها. وفي حال لم تكن عائلتها داعمة لها أو كانت العائلة هي السبب المعنف أو سبب العنف الموجه ضدها، هون طبعا بتكون المشكلة أكثر تعقيدا. ويترتب على المنظمات العاملة في برامج الحماية تحمل أعباء إضافية. كان لابد من أنه نبادر كاتحاد مرأة في إنشاء برامج مساندة، وهي عبارة عن برامج تدريب للنساء بتساهم في تعليمهم مهنة معينة، وبتعمل بعدها على إعادة إدماجهم يا إما في هاي البرامج بوظيفة دائمة أو وظيفة مؤقتة لحين إيجاد عمل مناسب تستطيع أن هي تقدر تستقر اقتصاديا. طبعا هذا كان ولا زال ليس بالأمر السهل واليسير. اعتمد الاتحاد في دعم السيدات الناجيات اللي بغادروا مأوى النساء على التبرعات اللي كانت تيجي أصلا من المتطوعات في اتحاد المرأة الأردنية، واللي كانوا يقدموا ما يمكن الاستغناء عنه في بيوتهم من أجل المساهمة في تكوين بيت للسيدة التي تغادر المأوى وما كانت تلاقي مكان ثاني إنها تأوي إليه. نعلم أنه هاي التبرعات قد لا تكون كافية ولا تتواجد، وهناك ولا زال تحدي بالنسبة لنا، وهو القدرة على ضمان الاستقرار الاقتصادي والاجتماعي للنساء اللي بيعانوا من العنف، سواء المراجعات لبرامج الإرشاد القانوني والاجتماعي والنفسي أو اللي مقيمات في مأوى النساء والغير. دوما كان اتحاد المرأة يسعى إلى إيجاد برامج حماية تتحملها الدولة لقناعتنا أن المساعدات المؤقتة ما بتشكل حلول للمشكلات. المساعدة اللي بتكون لمرة واحدة لا يمكن أن تشكل حل، يعني ولا ممكن أنها تشكل حل للسيدة، إلا أن احنا نضطر إلى هاي الحلول المؤقتة اللي بتساعد طبعا في سلسلة برامج بيسعى إلها الاتحاد، وهي مساعدة السيدة كما ذكرت على التدريب أو التدرب والاندماج في سوق العمل، وليس الاعتماد على المساعدة الدائمة، لأنها ما بتشكل حل إلا حلول مؤقتة وليست حلول جذرية سواء لمشكلتها الاقتصادية، وما بتشكل أيضاً استقرار دائم. وعليه طبعاً أنا بدأت ذكرت سابقاً البرامج اللي المتوفرة واللي بتساهم في إيجاد استقرار. المساعدات المالية طبعاً هي جاءت لحتى تشكل حلقة وسيطة بين الفترة اللي بنسعى فيها لإيجاد حلول جذرية لمشكلة السيدة المعنفة والوصول إلى الاستقرار. وعلى بناء على اللي أنا ذكرته يمكن في عنا شوية يعني خلينا نقول إنجازات، وقسمتهم أنا فئات نساء اللي إحنا اشتغلنا عليهم. بداية عنا النساء المقيمات في أو السيدات المقيمات في المأوى واللي بيحتاجوا لمساعدات طارئة متعلقة باحتياجاتهم الطبية أو علاجات نفسية المأوى ما بيوفرها. طبعا هاي المساعدات المالية كانت حل للمشكلات اللي كنا بنواجهها سابقا. بدي أتحدث عن النساء أو السيدات اللي بغادروا الأردن متجر فيه، يعني بيتم تحويلهم من مكافحة الإتجار بالبشر إلى مأوى النساء. كل سيدة منهم تحصل على مساعدة قبل سفرها بتساعدها على تلبية احتياجاتها أثناء سفرها، وبتمكنها من الوصول إلى أسرتها أو عائلتها بسلام. قدمنا مساعدات للنساء كانوا في مرحلة الإدماج. في كثير من السيدات عملنا معهم اشتغلنا معهم للوصول إلى استقرار اقتصادي، كانوا في مرحلة وتوقفوا بسبب عدم قدرتهم على دفع الأقساط الجامعية بعد خروجهم من الموضوع. بحب أذكر أنه في عنا حالة أو سيدة هي تدرس الحقوق وهي بالفصل الأخير من دراستها، وساعدتها المساعدات النقدية أو CVA على استكمال دراستها وهي بالفصل الأخير كما ذكرت. أما بالنسبة للنساء الغارمات اللي قدمنا المساعدات لهم هن ملاحقات قانونيا أو قضائيا بسبب إجبار المعنف لهم لحتى يقوموا بالاستدانة من الشركات المالية اللي انتشرت بكثرة في الأردن وبتشجع السيدات على الاستدانة. في بعض من السيدات أرسلناهم لبرامج تدريب وقمنا بدفع الرسوم اللازمة لاستكمال الدورات اللي بتأهلها لاحقاً في الحصول على عمل، بالإضافة للمعونات اللي قدمناها للعديد من السيدات. طبعاً هي حل يعني مشكلات مؤقتة مثل احتياجات منزلية، ممكن فواتير مياه وكهرباء، ممكن دفع أجر مثل. اللي بدي أضيفه بالأخير إنه بظل غياب الحماية الاجتماعية للنساء المعنفات، وخاصة أن موضوع العنف ضد المرأة هو ليس في أولوية خطة الحماية الاجتماعية اللي بتستهدف الفقراء، ولكن يعني لا تنظر للنساء المعنفات كفئة مهمة تحتاج إلى الحماية الاجتماعية أو أنه نأخذ هذا الموضوع بعين الاعتبار. ظهر كثير أثناء فترة كورونا أنه كانت النساء المعنفات خارج برامج الدعم وعملية إيصالهم لبرامج الحماية ولم تؤخذ بعين الاعتبار. نحن بنطبق برنامج الدعم المالي ضمن رؤية نسعى لتحقيقها ونشوف انها وسيله للوصول الى الحمايه الاجتماعيه في بعض الحالات، وخاصه الحالات اللي بتبحث عن الاستقلال الاقتصادي كمدخل لخروجها من دائره العنف. إذا بدي ألخص من هاي رؤيتنا أو أهدافنا اللي إحنا بنحاول نشتغل عليها، يمكن ألخصهم بنقطتين بشكل سريع لضيق الوقت. الاستقرار المالي والاقتصادي، واللي بنقترح له برامج تأهيل وتدريب بهدف تشكيل برامج تشغيل وطنية تستهدف النساء المعنفات. اثنين، استمرارية هذا الدعم وعدم ارتباطه بسقف أو فترة زمنية من خلال إيجاد صندوق دعم للنساء المعنفات بيكون جاهز للمساعدة وما يكون مرتبط بالتمويل بشكل مباشر أو بالمشاريع المؤقتة. شكرا كثير لكريس وللجميع وبعتذر عن الإطالة. يعطيكم العافية.
شكرا سارة. Again, what I'm hearing, and I keep hearing, and this is a similar point with everyone, you know, we're talking about continuity, we're talking about holistic approaches, we're talking about linking with national services, but also potentially community services or community-led projects. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Hannah Zant. She's with Women's Affairs Center based in Palestine. Hannah is a human rights activist specializing in women and girls' rights and is an information and research program coordinator with WAC in Gaza. She has 8 years of experience in design and implementing gender-based violence response programs. In addition, she is the protection and gender-based violence focal point for WAC and the focal point for the protection cluster and gender-based violence sub-working group. Hannah, ahla wa sahla, and over to you.
يسعد مساكم جميعا. أنا راح أحكي بالعربي بعد إذنكم. أول شيء سعيدة إنه أنا آخر متحدثة عن المؤسسات المحلية اللي بتشتغل بشكل دايركت مع الناجيات، لأنه أنا بشكل شخصي اكتشفت إنه إحنا بالإقليم هذا بنواجه تحديات متشابهة إلى حد كتير كبير، إشكالات متشابهة مع النساء ونجاحات أيضا قد تكون مشابهة. إذا بدي أحكي من خلال عملنا مؤخراً في موضوع CVA كخدمة أساسية ضمن الباكج أوف سيرفيس مع الناجيات من العنف بمركز شؤون المرأة وبالمؤسسات المحلية بشكل عام بقطاع غزة وبفلسطين، بلشنا بتقديم هاي الخدمة بعد كورونا مباشرة، يعني بال2021. النجاح المهم إنه خدمة CVA صارت خدمة أساسية ضمن باكج الخدمات المقدمة للسرفايفر، لأنه بشكل أساسي للحفاظ على كرامتهم وتوفير الحماية لهم أثناء وضع خطة التمكين للناجيات. ساهم النقد أو القسائم بتعزيز قدرة النساء بتحديد خياراتهم بشكل كتير أقوى ويصمدوا أكثر أمام الأزمات اللي بيتعرضوا لها، خصوصاً النساء المعلقات أو النساء ذوات الإعاقة أو أحياناً النساء المعرضات للتزويج القسري أو التزويج المبكر. هذا النقد أدى لصمودهم أمام هاي الأزمات. والموضوع مش مرتبط بالمستوى الاقتصادي للأسر أو الأفراد، لا، إطلاقا. الموضوع مرتبط بقدرة النساء على التحكم بالمصادر وقدرتهم على تلبية احتياجاتهم الأساسية الشخصية بغض النظر عن المستوى الاقتصادي للأسر، لأنه أولوية الصرف أو أولوية احتياجات النساء هي مش من ضمن الترتيب ولا الأول ولا الثاني ولا الثالث عند الأسر والأفراد. أيضا قدرتهم على تلبية احتياجاتهم حسب ما يروه هم مناسب السرفايفر أنفسهم لتوفير الحماية والكرامة والعيش بإنسانية في وقت الأزمة الحقيقي. هاي هي كانت أهم النتائج أو السكسس أنا بعتبرها، واللي لمسنا أثر فيها أثناء تقديمنا أو أثناء التدخل هذا. دعم صمود الناجيات خلال خطة التدخل اللي من خلال الكيس مانجمنت، الكاش دعم صمود الناجيات فيها وتحديد خياراتهم بشكل أفضل لحد ما وصلوا لمرحلة التمكين والتعافي. كمان في نقطة على مستوى مزودي الخدمات. بدأوا مزودي الخدمات بمشاركة خبراتهم ومشاركة الممارسات الفضلة والسكسس ستوريز والإجراء الأمثل لتقديم هاي الخدمة. هذا الموضوع شوي شوي عم بيطوروا قدراتهم بالإجراء الأمثل للCVA أثناء التدخلات. إذا بدنا نحكي عن التحديات، أنا بتوقع تحدياتنا كأقاليم متشابهة، ولكن في فلسطين موضوع الاحتلال والعدوانات المتكررة، الحصار، الأوضاع الإنسانية اللي كتير صعبة وبتشكل تحدي عند العامة وبشكل محدد أكثر عند النساء، لأنه النساء بتعاني من دبل عنف. أنا بحكي عن العنف اللي بيعانوا منه كل المجتمع، بالإضافة لانعكاسه المباشر عليهم، بالإضافة للعنف المبني على النوع الاجتماعي بكافة أشكاله وأنواعه اللي بتضاعف كتير بالأزمات المستمرة. ما عندنا أوقات الوتيرة بتخف، وبالتالي النساء معاناتها بشكل مزدوج، خصوصا النساء والفتيات. فالتحديات كانت العدد الكبير للطلب أو اللي بتستدعي خطط التدخل معهم لوجود الكاش ضمن الخطة بشكل عاجل وسريع، وهذا الفند مش متوفر لجميع الكيسز أو السرفايفر اللي بتحتاج لهذا التدخل. أيضا عدم استقرار التمويل وتوفره بفترات متقطعة بشكل دائم، وبالتالي ما بيلبي الاحتياج الحقيقي اللي موجود فعليا. أغلب النساء عندهم محدودية تحكم بمصادرهم، فحتى الكاش أندر بس الباكج أوف سيرفيس للGBV هو اللي بيعطيهم مساحة لأنه يلبوا احتياجاتهم. عدم شمولية الخدمات في القطاعات المختلفة وعدم الأخذ معايير الGBV بعين الاعتبار، بمعنى المؤسسات اللي بتقدم خدمات أساسية زي الفود أو الكاش أو المساعدات هاي ما بتاخذ معايير الGBV بعين الاعتبار أثناء تقديمها للخدمات هاي. هذا الموضوع بشكل كتير تحدي ممكن يحد من الأزمة. شو رؤيتنا؟ أنا بتمنى نوصل لمرحلة زيرو GBV وما نضطر لهاي الخدمات كلها، ولكن أنا بأتمنى أن تصبح الخدمات النقدية والمساعدات النقدية والقسائم ضمن الخدمات الأساسية، وتوفر الفند لها بشكل دائم وبشكل مرن وبشكل غير مشروط، ورؤيته وتحديد التوجه فيه للكيس مانجرز اللي بيديروا الحالة هاي. الشغلة الثانية، ضروري يكون في برامج ثابتة للتمويل بشكل طويل المدى مش قصير المدى. كمان لازم ناخذ معايير الحماية من العنف المبني على النوع الاجتماعي ضمن التدخلات القطاعية، مش بس under الGBV intervention. كمان ضرورة العمل ضمن خطط موحدة وطنية أو إقليمية، لأنه نشتغل ضمن المينيمم ستاندرد بكل التدخلات، يكون المبادئ الأساسية لها الكرامة، الإنسانية، الحماية للسيرفايفر. شكرا كتير لكم.
Thank you so much. So many excellent points. I've been taking notes throughout all of your statements, and I'm hearing also about power dynamics. I'm hearing about spending priorities and how that's affected in general, let alone for gender-based violence survivors, but especially the sectoral potential blind spots that exist programmatically and beyond that. With that, I want to say thank you to all of our representatives working with the local actors across MENA. The wealth of learning and experience you share with us today and every day is extremely valuable and important to all conversations. I would like to now welcome and say hello to the donor representatives with us today. So I'm going to ask you to turn on your cameras and for our lovely local actors to turn off your cameras. And I'll bring you back in a few. So now let's hear from the donors in terms of what their successes and challenges and perceptions or perspectives on the way forward. First off, I'd like to introduce Stefan Bombacher. He's with the STC and is the Program Officer for Cash and Voucher Assistance. Stefan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks for having me. Thanks for organizing this very important workshop, and really congratulations on all the achievements. In terms of successes from our side, we have seen in very recent years operational GBV programming organizations that they have shown an extraordinary capacity to incorporate very agile cash assistance into their holistic support to GBV survivors. And we've been happy to see the MENA region at the forefront of this development. By expanding the learning and paving the way for replication, the MENA region has been providing a much needed push for other regions across the globe. We've seen GBV experts and cash experts increasingly working together on this at the field, country, regional, and HQ levels. And it's been great to see their exchange of know-how and skills to ensure the best care is provided to GBV survivors. This particular initiative of WRC and CARE as part of the Global Protection Cluster Task Team on Cash Protection really promotes this effort. It is open and accessible to all, and it's a great opportunity to learn more and on how to work together in actual practice. Despite all these developments, very positive developments, there are still challenges, of course. We need to better understand the specificities of this type of cash assistance compared to some of the more regular, larger CVA programs, and acknowledge that they present unique challenges. GBV survivors and other key population groups with specific needs can often fall through the cracks of large-scale CVA programs. Therefore, it is important to not only fund multi-purpose cash programs to cover basic needs, but also fund sectoral cash for protection, and GBV outcomes. And of course, we need to make sure that women and other vulnerable groups can be reached, have access to cash, have the financial literacy to use the money, and that the partners do the necessary analysis in terms of vulnerability and conflict sensitivity. As donors, we need to provide agility to implementing organizations while understanding that it may be difficult for them to predict the exact number of GBV survivors that will be assisted and the total of cash transfers to be dispersed. And we also need to understand that the way the cash is delivered, the transfer value, their frequency will be formulated to respond to the variable needs and risks of GBV survivors. And at times that may involve tailoring it to each individual GBV survivor's action plan. We should also make sure to provide sufficient funding so it can be used to cover the adequate duration for GBV survivors and not have them fall back into unsafe situations. So it does require us donors to think and process differently as well, just like implementing organizations have done, to safely and successfully integrate cash as an additional tool in the support provided to GBV survivors. As a way forward, we need to continue to build evidence on utilizing cash transfers, on outcomes of violence against women and women's empowerment. For us at STC, the prevention and response to GBV is a priority area, and CVA is a tool that is anchored in our ways of working since the late 90s. We have supported this very interesting initiative by WRC and CARE. And in addition, we have also been working with UNFPA on the use of cash assistance for GBV outcomes. And we really welcome the integrated approach undertaken in the provision of formal training, regional and country workshops, awareness on existing guidance, tools and best practices, as well as case studies to support documentation and evidence building. We welcome all of the know-how and understanding that has been gained over this past year, and we will use it in our discussions with our partners who implement GBV projects, GBV actors, including the GBV area of responsibility, as well as our other multilateral partners working on GBV and cash assistance. That's back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Stefan. And you know, a few words kind of stuck in my head. You know, you're talking about agility, flexibility, the importance of collaboration and where we are today, but you know, all of the future opportunities that exist. Thank you. Next up, I would like to introduce Ileana Irato. She is with ECHO, and she's the Regional Protection and Gender Thematic Expert in the Middle East and Eastern Neighborhood, and is the global focal point for cash and protection. Ileana, welcome today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you everybody for sharing all these very interesting initiatives and projects and the challenges you're facing. We know they are many. So starting with the successes so far, well, I think that definitely one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest successes has been recognizes that GBV is a very complex issue, and that the economic factor plays a big role. And we moved a little bit away from the typical response we have been implementing until not long ago, which were very often vocational training, and that's it. So we are expanding the type of support we can provide to GBV survivors, but we are also expanding our understanding of the main contributing factors to GBV, and try to go out of our comfort zone, which is the protection sector, to try to explore a little bit new and more innovative way to respond to the different needs, prevent and respond then to GBV. With this, it also came a little bit, we finally went over our initial reluctance in the use of cash for GBV and the whole safety. We now have tools, we now have more and more evidence that cash is not more risky than any other modality. It is important to discuss with the survivors and to understand what is the best way, but at least we have now included. And it's really great to hear all this collaboration between the GBV working group and the cash working group and the different cross collaboration and coordination. And I really did appreciate, I think it was mentioned in the Iraq example in the previous session, on the time that it takes for cash and GBV actors to even speak the same language. If I'm not wrong, we talk about a 6-month process, which I think it's extremely important to keep in mind, because it's true. It takes some time if we want to do things in a good way and serve survivors in the best way possible. As mentioned by Stefan, we still, of course, have challenges. The protection sector in general, including GBV, has been a little bit late in taking up the whole use of cash, and therefore we are still at not at the beginning anymore, but we're still learning a lot from what we are doing. Hence, of course, the challenges are always there. As ECHO, as you know, ECHO is very much of a humanitarian donor. We do, which pushes a lot for cash. We do find a little bit of confusion between the use of cash for protection outcomes. So when it comes to actual protection intervention and the instead covering basic needs of survivors with a little bit less technical expertise than what a cash working group would do. Hence, the collaboration is even more important, because sometimes we might also find ways to establish better integrated programming between cash and protection actors, rather than necessarily incorporating what we do. Or at least we should, if we want to cover basic needs, we should as much as possible reflect what the cash working group transfer values, etc., are developing in a specific context. Another challenge I find is that resources are still very much agency related, and we are still waiting for a little bit more interagency type of guidance, including for monitoring that has been mentioned more than once in the different interventions, for which I'm sure the Global Task Team and the Tenzin on the call have taken good notes of, and hopefully we will see more. Because as of now, we see a little bit of different approaches in different contexts, that even in the MENA region, if we look at the different countries that have intervened today, there are very different approaches and methodologies to provide cash for protection. Besides the specificity of the context, we should all agree on the best practices, and now we have a lot of learning, which brings me to the way forward. Definitely continue with monitoring and evaluation. That is extremely important, especially because we are still learning, and we need to learn on the basis of evidence and not on the basis of assumption. We need to continue going back to what we have done and check if we have done it well or if we have to improve something. And for this, both at action level, so for each project, but also on a broader level, we should make sure, and also from a donor perspective, we should make sure that funding are available to conduct such study. And last but not least, on the length of the funding, again, speaking from a humanitarian donor perspective, of course, our funding are still pretty limited in timing, but I think we have a great opportunity at this point to, pass me the term, exploit the discussion that the cash working group are having in linking cash and social protection, which is very much on the table in basically every country, and try to come as protection, as GBV actors into this discussion, because this is where the long term is in the development program, is in the integration of a specific population in national systems. So this is where is the next step for us. Beyond the cash working group, we should also start sitting at tables where longer term programming, because we have the evidence from the field. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Eliana. And again, you know, I'm still hearing, again, consistently across all of you in terms of the importance of agility, flexibility, but also factoring in, you know, the different components at every level, between evidence, between ensuring quality programming, coordination, and making sure that it's streamlined and it makes sense, while addressing all of the needs on the ground. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Catherine, and I apologize from now, I might completely mispronounce your last name. Bakrak, is that correct? Or have I completely missed it? Oh, wow.
No, that's pretty good, Bakrak. Good work.
Thank you. Catherine is with PRM, and she's the Gender Equality and GBV Officer. So Catherine, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to hear all the other interventions. The US is committed to preventing and responding to gender-based violence, particularly the protection and empowerment of women and girls, as a life-saving priority and an integral part of every humanitarian response. We remain committed to our Safe from the Start initiative and our involvement with the Call to Action on Protection from Gender-Based Violence in Emergencies. Safe from the Start, for those of you who don't know, is a joint initiative launched in 2013 between PRM and the USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. The initiative aims to increase leadership, accountability, and resources available for life-saving GBV prevention and response, and ensure quality services for survivors from the very onset of emergencies. Since 2013, PRM has channeled more than $148 million through Safe from the Start to systematically prevent and respond to GBV. We have also provided a significant amount in additional funding for core and specialized GBV prevention and response activities through other mechanisms. Some of this funding has gone towards using cash and voucher assistance for GBV prevention and response, including most recently for UNFPA to integrate cash and voucher assistance expertise into GBV programming and coordination. Cash and voucher assistance can be an effective way to prevent and respond to GBV, specifically when delivered within case management and alongside protection interventions. In Lebanon, PRM supports a local organization providing emergency and protection cash assistance through integrated case management services to adolescent girls and young women at risk of GBV. We also know that cash and voucher assistance alone cannot overcome protection issues such as gender-based norms and systems, lack of access to local education or social systems, or the lack of other protection services. Our shared challenge is how to better support humanitarians to consider individual and local contexts and preferences to most effectively weave cash and voucher assistance into GBV programming. In 2020, the Global Protection Cluster's stock taking on CVA for protection noted several evidence gaps remain on the linkages between cash and protection. Key among those gaps was the impact of cash for the most excluded and marginalized groups of GBV survivors and individuals at risk. In the past several years, the humanitarian community has made immense strides through research and evaluations on cash programming and GBV. For example, we learned from a recent UNFPA and Johns Hopkins study in Jordan that the additional cash assistance to case management for survivors and women at risk of GBV yielded additional benefits by mitigating risk of violence and improving psychological well-being. Furthermore, the research also yielded recommendations on the frequency and shape of that transfer. Recurrent cash transfers yielded greater benefits in terms of improved partner and household relationships and psychological well-being. Although we can't generalize those results, it does highlight the progress we've made on building a greater evidence base on how to use cash and voucher assistance for GBV outcomes. This is both a success in the past few years as well as an area we still need to build on moving forward. Like for any other modality for delivering assistance, appropriate program design and targeting of cash and voucher assistance is foundational to its effectiveness. A key next step will be to continue breaking down the silos between protection actors and those working on cash, an area highlighted in the stock-taking report, but one which we still need greater progress. Furthermore, we also need to start using the growing evidence base to generate even greater comfort across both our protection and cash counterparts on more regularly building cash and voucher assistance into GBV programs, effectively turning research into practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for also, continuously adding to the conversation, and also kind of really giving us a snapshot from different perspectives, what you guys are similarly looking at, but what isn't also similar. So this has been really insightful, and now I'd like to invite the local actor colleagues to join us. So please turn on your cameras. I'd like to take this opportunity to really highlight the importance of these conversations and this space specifically. It can be very easy to get caught up in our day-to-day tasks and our jobs and whatnot, and engagement slips on different levels, but to be in the same space, talking about the same thing and working together as peers is something else. And this is what's going to contribute to the collective understanding and create the opportunities to move forward. So with that, I'm going to kick off the conversation with hearing back initial reactions or reflections from the local actor colleagues on what we've heard from our donor peers right now. Feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Also, if any of the donor colleagues would like to react to the points shared in the previous round by the local actors, the space is now open. Hannah, over to you.
معلش أنا مضطرة أحكي بالعربي. أول شيء أنا كثير سعيدة أني أسمع وجهة نظر الدونرز الأساسيين في تقديم الخدمات الإنسانية، وكثير سعيدة كمان أني سمعت من الأقاليم البلدان المجاورة لنا بنفس الإقليم والتحديات المشابهة. النقطة اللي كنت حابة أحكي فيها إنه بالفترات الأخيرة من الملاحظ زيادة حالة الGBV بشكل عام، وإن كانت الإحصاءات ما بتدلل على هذا الموضوع، ولكن كمان من الملاحظ إنه الفند بشكل عام اللي مرتبط بالGBV ريسبونس هو عماله بقل، يمكن لأنه الأزمات الإنسانية الأخرى كتير كبيرة بالإقليم، وبالتالي الفند بيروح بهاي المطارح. ولكن أنا مقتنعة تماماً إنه الريسبونس للGBV بيساهم بطريقة مباشرة أو غير مباشرة بتقليل الأزمات الإنسانية الأخرى، بمعنى إنه الGBV هو محطة أساسية لازم نشتغل عليها لحتى نوصل للتنمية المستدامة بشكل عام. موضوع CVA هو تدخل كتير أساسي وكتير مهم، مش لحاله ضمن باكج الخدمات، ولكن هو محور أساسي لنجاح باقي الخدمات ضمن الكيس مانجمنت أو دراسة الحالة بشكل أساسي. بأتمنى إنه التوصيات اللي انطرحت من قبلنا جميعا إنه تؤخذ بعين الاعتبار أثناء وضع الخطط الاستراتيجية بشكل كامل عند الجميع، إذا كان اللوكال بارتنر أو اللي بيشتغلوا بشكل مباشر مع السيرفايفر، أو إن كان عند الدونر عند وضع الأولويات. كل الشكر على المساعدة بشكل كتير كبير سابقا، وبأتمنى إنه صدقا هذا التدخل إنه ينوضع ضمن البرايورتيز اللي نشتغل عليها بالفترة القادمة.
Thank you, Hannah. Excellent points as usual. Stefan, over to you, and then Wissam.
Thanks. I just wanted to quickly react to Hannah's point, also mentioning that I have to leave after these two sentences to another meeting. And I wanted to agree with what Hannah's been saying and emphasize that we need to be mindful of the need to fund GBV efforts properly and do it as a top-up to ongoing program efforts rather than a budget shift. So if organizations are looking into piloting a project in this regard, we need to ensure that they have additional funding for it and don't start reducing the budget of their regular programs for GBV outcomes to cover for an additional cash component. This is just as a point, but unfortunately I have to run now into another meeting. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, Stefan, and yes, we'll stay in touch. Thank you again. Wissam, did you want to jump in? Sorry, Eliana, he had his hand raised first. I just want to make sure if you still want to.
Yes, I do. My question was specifically for Stefan because he mentioned, but we can leave. It's fine. It's fine. I think it could be answered by either you or Eliana or Catherine. Is more about you speaking about how to custom make or tailor your intervention or your fundings according to the specificity of each experience, and that's something that we usually work a lot towards as local organizations and grassroots organizations to really touch base with our donors and our supporters. So I would like to know more, what are the practical steps or technical steps that you are following recently, especially in the upcoming funding cycle? Thank you.
Stefan, if you need to step out. Yep, I think he did. There we go. Eliana, I'm going to hand over to you. And Stefan had mentioned that Raida is with us. And if Raida, if you'd like to take Wissam's question after Eliana's input, please let us know. Eliana, over to you.
Thank you. I think I can reply also, at least from the eco perspective, to Wissam on the last point. So we definitely, as ECHO, as you know, you might know, unfortunately, we cannot fund directly national actors, but we don't have, but in our funding, we don't have earmark funding for specific sector. It's really very much depending on what our partners are proposing to us. And here I'm really trying to be very open and have a frank discussion with you. We receive very few GBV proposals, let alone the cash component, very few GBV proposals. that have to start with. And when you look at quality, which for GBV, it's already important for every sector, but for GBV, quality means safety. You can reduce by another 30% the one that we would be able to fund because we trust enough that the methodology is, even when the inclusion of cash, if you look at the linkages between cash and the GBV outcome, we very often don't find it. It's simply paying for the basic needs of the beneficiaries, for which then additional questions come back, right? Why don't you work with NPC actors? Why don't you refer? What is the issue, etc. So I feel because this issue that donors do not want to fund GBV is often on the table, and now that I've been working for quite some years in a donor, I can tell you that this is not the case. We do discuss about GBV quite a lot. But I'm telling you that the proposal that I was receiving in my previous post in Nairobi, for proposal for South Sudan, Somalia, are very, very similar to the proposal I'm receiving for Lebanon or for Jordan. There is very little contextualization. There is very little work to adapt the program to be really relevant to the context. And it's very much a copy and paste type of approach, which at least from our perspective is not necessarily the right approach to be able to counter such a big problem, together with a little bit of this assumption that we work on gender equality with humanitarian funding, which it's not like ECHO doesn't believe that is important. It's just we think that with humanitarian funding might not be the best instrument to do that. So it's really repackaging a little bit, but really contextualizing, which is very often what we are missing. My other protection colleague is also on the line, Elsa, in case she wants to add anything later.
Thank you so much, Eliana. And it's really important to hear this kind of perspective of what's actually happening. Hannah, is that a new hand? هلا رفعتي ايدك عن جديد؟
صحيح. بدي أرد على نقطة إليانا بموضوع اللينك ما بين CVA كتدخل بيحد وبيأثر في موضوع GBV وبيقلل منه. GBV تدخلاته أكثر من مستوى. في مستوى إغاثي سريع عاجل مع السيرفايفر، وفي مستوى تاني تنموي بنشتغل فيه على القوانين والحقوق والتوعية المجتمعية. المستوى اللي بنشتغل فيه تدخل إغاثي سريع مع السيرفايفر، أنا ما بدي السيرفايفر تقبل بالحلول وهي ضعيفة، أنا بدي أدعم صمودها لحد ما أقدم لها الباكج من الخدمات. أنا لحد ما أوصل فيها لأنه تكون ممكنة، أنا محتاجة أدعمها لتكون قوية. الكاش بيدعمها لتكون قوية وتاخذ قرار صحيح تجاه نفسها وتجاه نجاتها وتجاه تقليل آثار وأعراض وأشكال العنف اللي بتتعرض له، لحتى تكون شخص ممكن قادر ياخذ قرار صحيح تجاه حياته ويقلل العنف عن نفسها وأسرتها وأطفالها والمحيطين فيها. الكاش هو عامل مساعد بيخلينا نقدر إن نطبق استراتيجية التدخل والحماية معها بشكل يدعمها بأخذ قراراتها واتجاه مستقبلها بطريقة صح. بيحد من التزويج المبكر لأنه أهلها بيقدروا يصرفوا عليها لحد ما توصل لبعد سن 18 أو على الأقل تخلص تعليمها. الست المعلقة بيخليها تعيش بكرامة بالبيت اللي هي عايشة فيه الآن لحد ما توصل لمرحلة إنه هي تصير سيرفايف. هاي النقطة اللي احنا بنحكي فيها كتير مهم. احنا كلوكال اورجانيزيشن نسلط الضوء على قديش CVA بيساهم بشكل كتير اساسي في تمكين النساء وتقليل GBV اللي بيقع عليهم. بتوقع انه هذا الدور احنا لازم نقوم فيه لحتى الاخرين يقتنعوا باللينك ما بينهم والتأثير القوي CVA لتقليل GBV. شكرا إليانا.
Thank you, Hannah. And I love that point on the responsibility that is also on local organization, the South-South collaboration and learning that will build that voice, that will support in contextualizing, that will support in the narrative that donors receive, and that will have to impact how things happen. Sarah, before I hand over to you, colleagues have told me that Raida has her hand up. Can someone please unmute her? And Raida, please go ahead. She is back to being muted.
Hello? You
yes.
Hear me? Yes. Hello?
Yes. Over to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Raida speaking from SDC. My colleague Stefan was speaking. So I'm responding to the question on the, if I understood well about the donor support to local organizations, right?
Wissam? Yes, that was, yes.
Can you please repeat, because you got cut off a little bit?
Yeah, so just I want to make sure that I listened to the question. So you were asking about the donors' perspective or the donors' support to local organizations related to CVA and GBV, right?
Yes, my question was that you're saying, because Stefan was saying that we need not to have a one-size-fits-all, but tailor our intervention, especially when with gender-based violence communities. So what are the technical approaches that are taken in order to achieve that? And that was a question mainly for everyone. So
yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, so to be honest, I can talk in general about our, as a donor, about our support to local organizations working on GBV programming, and not specifically related to the combination or the integration of CVA and GBV. But on the technical approaches, so what we are doing is supporting INGOs, and through this support to INGOs, they also channel the support to local organizations through capacity building, through financial support, and I mean technical and financial and organizational capacity building. So this is one of the approaches. Another approach actually we are using, and I have to say we've been promoting more, and of course this applies to CVA and GBV, is what we call the backstopping role or the supportive role of INGOs when work with local organizations, and with the aim of give the ownership for local organizations to take this role in the GBV programming, but they lead the contract, for example, and the project. But then the role of the INGO is to only give the technical support when needed. So this approach really we've been promoting more, and also direct support to local organizations without necessarily having this backstopping role of INGOs. But like also as other donor colleagues mentioned, we are still slowly trying to pilot this approach of direct support to local organizations, and we have started doing this. But we need to have like evidence really about the impact that this approach is doing, and to also to assess, to be honest, the risk. And this is not only related, of course, to local organizations, but to also INGOs when working on GBV programming and the risk that might happen from this support. So yeah, these are the approaches we are using when it comes to GBV programming. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Raida. That's very insightful. I'm mindful about the time, and I wish we had so much more, to be very honest with all of you. This space is beyond amazing. Just to hear this kind of honesty and openness amongst peers, that is much needed. So I'm going to take Sarah's point, and I have another question for all of you. So Sarah, over to you.
شكرا كريس، شكرا للجميع ولكل الممولين اللي معنا. بشكر هنا على الشيء اللي قدمته. بس أنا بدي أضيف شيء يعني هو استكمال للي حكته هنا، إنه CVA هو مش برنامج منفصل عن الكيس مانجر او الكيس مانجمنت للجي بي في، لانه انا بشتغل بسياق واحد. انا من ضمن الخدمات اللي انا بقدمها بالكيس مانجمنت للسيدات المعنفات او للجي بي في هو بيجي حلقه وصل ما بين الشيء اللي انا بطمح له او انا بسعى لتحقيقه باستقرار او وصول النساء للاستقرار المالي، وان هي تطلع من دائره العنف. هو ما بيشتغل عليه لحاله، وصعب كثير نحكي عن السي في اي بشكل منعزل او منفصل كبرنامج منفصل عن الجي بي بي، لانه هي بتصفي حلول مؤقته. يعني انا عم بحكي عن حل مؤقت مش طويل الامد. بدايات السي في اي كانت عم بحكي تحديدا في اتحاد المراه، هو كان مع بدايه كورونا، فرضت علينا اجراءات جديده. اضطرينا انه احنا في عندنا مشاريع او برامج جمعيه ونشاطات تفاعليه بحكم الاغلاقات اللي فرضتها كورونا والتباعد اللي صار. فاحنا حولنا جزء من هاي المخصصات لموضوع المساعدات الماليه. هلا هاي كانت كلها مؤقته. احنا هلا اللي بنسعى فيه، لانه لمسنا نتائج ايجابيه بموضوع المساعدات الماليه زي ما حكيت قبل، انه ساعدنا كثير من النساء سواء الغارمات او اللي بيحاولوا انهم يرجعوا يدرسوا او اللي مهددين بالحبس الى اخره. لهيك نحن بنسعى انه يكون في عندنا صندوق بيدعم هدول النساء، هو مش مشروط بتمويل مؤقت او ضمن برامج مؤقته. وهذا طبعا بتطلب تكاتف في الجميع، هو ما بنشتغل عليه لحالنا بضوء غياب البرامج الحكومية اللي بيجي على مسؤوليتها الحماية الاجتماعية. فهذا بيضيف علينا مسؤوليات أكبر على عاتقنا، كون إحنا نشتغل بموضوع الحماية الاجتماعية والجي بي بي وإلى آخره. هذا بده شيء تشاركي، الكل نحاول إنه نشتغل عليه لحتى نسعى للاستقرار الاقتصادي للسيدات، ويكون برامج طويلة الأمد وليست قصيرة الأمد. وشكرا للجميع.
Thank you, Sarah. Wissam, do you have some? Is that an old hand or a new hand?
No, that's not the legacy hand, but please go ahead, go into your next question, and I can just segue my way out into it. So no worries. I'll figure a way to say what I want.
Thank you. I think, you know, we've heard a lot about the realities and the challenges and whatnot. So I think two quick questions. I'm very ambitious considering the time, but just very quickly from the local actors, what are the challenges you have faced regarding funding in terms of, well, funding in general? We've talked about duration, we've talked about all of these aspects. What are other things that you would like to shed light on in this conversation? I'm going to take two speakers from the local actors, because then I want to hand over to our donor colleagues and ask them what are your asks of local organizations and colleagues in terms of things to consider moving forwards that would strengthen funding policy and practice. So I'll leave that with our donor colleagues to think about, while I hand over to our local actor colleagues, Amani and then Wissam. Amani, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. And I would like here to comment very quickly, and thanks for first the donors, besides their support technically, financially, and everything they've done in this regard, but also there are as a local actors and grassroots organizations, we have difficulties and challenges in applying directly to the big donors. The requirement and prerequisite requirement is really over the existing capacity, and the eligibility criteria is really oversized. So we understand that you need high quality performance, high quality capacity, but also after like a significant and long-term working in GBV and CVA and different sectors, we have a minimum or threshold that we can apply directly without this level of intervention of other layers. This is my general comment.
Thank you, Amani. Wissam, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Amani. I think that I can segue from your last point to what I think most challenges we suffer from when dealing with donors or when dealing with like big agencies, especially when we're grassroots or when we're a small organization, is the overall requirements generally across the project period. Usually the ongoing guidelines and requirements, whether administrative, whether financial, whether procurement, and that are, to say it in a very diplomatic way, that are quite rigid and does not fit the work that or the capacity of this smaller community organization, and you end up doing 80% of the work to prepare finances and procurement documents instead of actually implementing the project. So I would say that is one of the challenges that we have. The other one is usually donors, whether we like it or not, they set trends into what kind of project or proposals that organizations apply to. So you see right now in Lebanon, there's a huge attraction towards including LGBT and trans people. So you see that people are recycling each other's projects, they're recycling previous projects. They're taking different aspects of the same project over and over again. So I think this is also another thing to take into account when designing projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Wissam. I'm going to hand over to the donors very quickly. You just heard all of these things, but in general, what are your asks of local organizations? If you'd like to quickly add in the 1-2 minutes we have left.
I do not have asks per se. But listen, this issue of the procedures and the complexities is way beyond, it's a big issue. The only point that I would like to raise is not that we do that because we have fun, because trust me, we do not have fun with that, is consider that what we deal with are public money, right? So these are the taxes that my mom and my dad are paying back in Italy and beyond, the European citizen in our case. So this is where all this comes from, which doesn't absolutely mean that we shouldn't talk about it and shouldn't make shouldn't have discussion on how we can sort out this problem, but I don't have a reply as of now, because again, I'm the protection gender expert. This is way beyond my pay grade. But in ECHO, for instance, we had this morning a 4-hour session on localization, and all these things were discussed. So I can definitely tell you that this is discussed, and there is a huge pressure on donors as well, coming from the Grand Bargain, etc., on what are you doing to make sure that this localization agenda is taking place. So it is there, and hopefully it is coming. Over from my side.
Thank you so much, Aliana. Catherine, would you like to add anything? Oh, I think we just lost you. Catherine, are you there? Okay. All right. I just want to say thank you again to everyone, but especially our panelists for today. You have no idea how amazing this conversation was and how important it is. But let's continue, right? National actors talking to each other regionally, coordinating, mobilizing, advocating. We've heard that donors would like a bit more, evidence. You have that evidence, so how can we move forward? And then from the donor perspective, how can we get closer? How can we make it more functional, more agile, and work better? Catherine, I can see that you're back. would you like to add anything very quickly? Very sorry about that.
Yeah, no, so sorry. I got booted out of Zoom for some reason. That's never happened to me before. But I think just quickly on funding local organizations, I can reiterate what Eliana was saying about it's quite burdensome. These requirements are quite burdensome on our side too. But you know, while it's difficult, PRM really does strive to support as many local partners as possible in the MENA region. That is a priority for that regional team. And they strongly encourage all partners to build the capacity of local organizations. We also have a small grant program known as the Julia Taft Refugee Fund, through which we have provided funding for local organizations. So it's not impossible to fund local organizations directly. It's just, it's quite difficult. And we know it's burdensome on the local partners as well. Yep. And the other thing I wanted to note is the call to action on protection from GBV and emergencies has really prioritized localization in the last couple of years in the most recent roadmap. So I think, you know, a lot of partners, including donors, have made commitments under this roadmap to localization and increasing funding. And now it's really time for our members to step up and deliver on these commitments. I know the US is trying to do so through our Safe from the Start initiative. We've prioritized this through that initiative. And I think we are just hopeful that other members will do the same and really just encourage local organization partners to the call to action to really keep speaking up and continue to demand that this be a priority.
Thank you very much. I have been really bad and we are 2 minutes over time. So again, thank you everyone. I would like to hand over back to Tenzin.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone. We are a little over, so I'll speed through the closing and with Paula. But just wanted to thank all of our amazing speakers, all of you who attended. These conversations are, you know, really meaningful. It's, you know, indisputable that over the past 7 or 8 years, there have been, you know, advancements globally and in the MENA region. There's field resources to be applied and contextualized. There's a growing evidence base to take forward so that programming is evidence-based and at scale. There are evidence gaps we need to address, work to do in policy and funding, and definitely greater work that's needed to support localization and to ensure that programming is inclusive and safe for survivors and individuals at risk with marginalized identities. So we're on that road together. We're not, you know, starting from scratch. We have a lot to build on, and looking forward to collaborating with all of you to get the job done. Paula, over to you.
Thank you. And as we all know, CASH is not a silver bullet. More effort is needed to integrate programming, including CVA integrated GBV with livelihood programming, as we heard, and for survivor to have a longer plan to recover and to give them the possibility to have an exit strategy without further harm. From my hand, I just really would like to thank you all who made it through the day with us. It has been a great pleasure to have you. And it's great to know that you guys, you are championing CVA and GBV approaches and you want to have further collaboration one another. I also would like to have the opportunity to thank all the colleagues, all the presenters that they shared their recommendation and that work with us to make this event possible. So thanks a lot to anyone from UNFPA, CASH-CALP, Intersos, UNHCR, CALP, of course, who supported us as well during the webinar series. Thanks for the donor representative, Eliana and Katie, to be with us, and SDC to be with us and to fund this opportunity. Thank you so much for all of you who participated, and you will receive the recording and the resources after the event. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and with this, I wish you a good rest of your day and hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Chris and Tenzin. You've been an amazing support, and it was lovely working with you, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.